Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the Airdrie City Council meeting to order. Please take your seats. Thank you very much. Today is May the 1st, 2017, and welcome you all to City Hall. A few housekeeping items for those of you who haven't been here before. Doors at the front where you came in. We have doors down the hallway. If there's an emergency, we'll muster it at the ATB across the way, and the bathrooms are just on the other side of that wall. First up, we have minutes, and I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Bellick, please.
Thank you. I'd like to make the motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of Council on April 18th, 2017, as presented. Okay.
Comments, questions? Everybody was good? Good. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much, Councillor Bellick. Next up, Councillor Hunter, please.
So everybody had a chance to look at the minutes for Airdrie Library Board of February 28th and Community Services Advisory Board of February 13th. If there's no errors or omissions, I would like to make a motion that we adopt.
Excellent. Any questions or concerns, comments? There being none, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Next up, we'll go a little out of order. We have just an exciting announcement, and I can see you're at the front row smiling. We have our pleased to announce the appointment of our Sergeant Kimberly Pazlowski as our detachment commander for Airdrie. Sergeant Pazlowski will assume her command on May 23rd, 2017. She was raised in Carstairs. We won't hold that against her. She's looking to love Airdrie, I know that. And working in Didsbury right now. She has 20 years experience in British Columbia and Alberta, including General Duty Detachment Command, General Investigation Section, GIS, Major Crimes Unit, including homicide in the Southern Alberta RCMP District. We are very much looking forward to working with Sergeant Pazlowski. I'm going to call her Kimberly because I have a tough time with her last name. And I know I can tell you from meeting with her and interviewing with her and the recommendations that came from other levels at the RCMP were all extremely high, extremely favorable. And I would just like everyone to join me in giving her a grand Airdrie welcome as our new detachment commander. Oh, you have to make a speech now, didn't you know? Are you prepared? You could, Paul said you could sing "O Canada" for us, but I don't want to put you on the spot.
I'm not a good singer.
No, but if you'd like to say a few words more, then please go ahead.
Well, as Mayor Brown said, I actually came from Carstairs. I'm actually giving up being the police, being the chief of police of my hometown to come to Airdrie. I think it's an exciting opportunity. I did grow up in the area, so I definitely know what Airdrie's come from and what Airdrie's grown into, and I'm really excited to be working with the very good members in our detachment and the very proactive community that we have here. I'm very excited. Thank you very much for having me.
That's awesome. All right, we're on Item number 5, consent agenda. 5.1. Is anybody who would like to ask any questions? Yes, Councillor Hunter, please.
Yes, sir, I would like to move 5.1 to the regular agenda.
Okay, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I'll ask Sharon, I believe, to come forward, please. And actually, I'm sure you can fire off your question right now while she's walking to the microphone.
Certainly. I would just like a Reader's Digest version of the touch points on the report, including maybe just ballpark numbers of costs.
Through the chair, your worship, I believe the Reader's Digest version is, yes, we could video stream boards and committees if council so desired. There are some committees that would need to be brought onto our eScribe system who are currently not. And basically the costs vary from approximately $7,500 a year. That would require an additional IT resource. And probably the biggest point we would like to point out is that we figure that if we're going to move forward with this, we really need to have some consultation with our individual board members on the various boards and committees, because they did not come into this with the understanding that they would be on YouTube and their meetings video streamed.
And so
Councillor
through the chair, can you just speak to, so what boards would not be eligible? I believe SDAB would not be one. Would there be any others? What if the decision was to move forward or to gather information on this, would there be any boards that would be excluded? Would SDA be excluded for legal reasons, et cetera?
Yes, at this point, the report does point out that probably our quasi-judicial boards, because they basically do not actually conclude within a certain period of time within the evening meeting, that we're recommending that your quasi-judicial boards would not be broadcast, and that the other boards, of course, would all need to meet in this particular chambers to be video streamed.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Any other questions for Sharon? Yes, Councillor Coulson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, I would still like to see MPC be live streamed. There are developing authority in a lot of cases. So I guess at this point, we would need to have that discussion and direct you to speak with MPC members, have those conversations and come back. Is that what I understand?
Council could at this point, if their desire was that Municipal Planning Commission was televised, they could direct us to have those conversations with the Municipal Planning Commission board members, and as long as no one was in opposition, then we would proceed with video streaming those particular meetings. If there was dissension to that possibility, probably what we would do at that point is just recommend that it be a part of the organizational meeting for 2018, and it would actually be advertised as a board that is webcast to the public.
Okay. So I guess, Your Worship, I don't know if we want to.
Do you want to make a motion, or? Because I'm supportive. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think MPC needs to be televised.
I have no problem being however many months away from an election and from our board appointments for the following year to not implement it up until we reappoint again. Maybe having those conversations moving forward, letting them know that this may be coming, and that could definitely depend on their decision of whether or not to return the following year. So I would have no problem making that motion, but I would like to hear the opinions of other council members first.
Perfect. Councillor Hunter.
So through the chair, I guess if we pick one, why not the others? Municipal Policing Advisory Board is one that comes to mind, although it meets quarterly, wouldn't be as onerous. Law and order, crime are very high on the agenda of the citizens as far as public safety. So I guess if we're going to proceed, I would like maybe drill down a little bit better as to what it would cost per each board, what the implications would be, and again, so what value the citizens see as to doing this. I know with council live streaming now on video, we're getting a lot more participation, and I'm not exactly sure numbers. I think I saw one where there's 171 participants, which was pretty good, but I think once word gets out there that we video stream one, it's just a matter of time before we would be getting asked to video stream more of them. So MPC, MPAB, library, all those different ones. I'm sure there's lots of people in the community that want different boards streamed for different reasons, but again, I'd like to sort of get a sense in the community as to what value the citizens see and the costs and the implications of doing that.
Okay, thank you. Good points. Yes, Sharon, go ahead, please.
If I may, Your Worship.
Yes.
Through the chair, just a couple of comments I would like to make. First of all, the library board does not meet over here. They meet at the library, and so that is one that would not be eligible. With the total cost for all of the boards of $5,700, I question whether council wants that broken down even further. That's a pretty nominal amount in terms of the city's budget. And the second piece I would like to offer is not all of the boards at this point are in a position where they're ready to go forward with streaming, depending on where they are with the eScribe program.
Yes.
So as they're brought on that program, then it would make sense to bring them on at that time.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Your Worship, if I could, I would like to make a motion.
Okay.
It is number 2, as stated in here. I'd like to make the motion that council choose to defer the rollout of broadcasting of these meetings to a future year when budgeting can be brought forward, basically 2018. And saying here, choosing this option will allow for staff to bring various boards, committees, and commissions onto the current software, but would delay the broadcasting decision to 2018, thereby allowing City Council and Council Budget Committee to be a venue for ironing out any problems that may occur with the rollout of the new software. And as for the reasons noted below, staff, no recommendation to the quasi-judicial boards, Assessment Review Board, Subdivision Appeal Board, and General Appeal Board. At this time, as noted above, it may have an impact to the volunteers. So okay. I would make that motion as number 2 as presented there.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions?
Yes, sir.
Sir, Deputy Mayor Burley.
Thank you, Worship. This would include the discussions with the board members as well? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, that's captured in the motion. Councillor Hunter.
So I guess the question I would have through the chair is, so if we're going to move to that, is there also a move to making sure that all of the information that will be provided out there will be coming on iPads for the different members, et cetera? Because some of the challenges that we're having is some have iPads of their own, some don't. We're getting paper copies, we're getting electronic copies, and it gets a little bit muddied there. So,
Sharon, please.
Through the chair, absolutely. The intention with the rollout was eScribe was to provide board members with an iPad should they so desire. Some members have indicated they have their own and don't wish a second, and so that's where people can end up using their own device. But absolutely, we do budget for that, and we do propose that to the boards as they come on.
Excellent.
perfect, and happy to support
Thank you. Councillor Coulson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, I guess I'll just ask Councillor Chapman if you would be amicable to an amendment to that motion. I think that it's important that, yes, we go to budget and we have all of the information at that time, but moving forward, it would be nice to see something in writing that those boards that come on and that want to sign up again in October, that they know that this is a possibility coming on, that we can't have a board member say, no, I don't want to do that in January when the actual budget is approved or not approved at that point. So
I'll accept that amendment for sure.
okay, thank you.
Okay, everyone's clear on the amendment? Excellent. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Thank you, Sharon. All right, appointments and presentations. We have very exciting appointments and presentations coming forward. This is 6.1, and I know Councillor Bellick is extremely excited to make some introductions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to call on Pauline Clark from Social Planner to come forward and tell us all about the 2017 Mayor of the Day Challenge winners, please.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. I am joined this evening by two members of the Airdrie Board of Youth Affairs who are here to announce and congratulate the two winners of the 2017 Mayor for the Day Challenge. First, to provide a bit of background, in 2009, City Council approved the first phase of the City of Airdrie's youth strategy, the purpose of which was to guide the city towards greater youth friendliness. This created a vision that provided Airdrie youth an opportunity to engage with their local government. Each year, students continue to exceed expectations by submitting their innovative and creative ideas for what they feel can build a greater community. This year, we received 44 applications. All were reviewed by administration as well as members of the Airdrie Board of Youth Affairs. Then the top 4 finalists presented their idea to members of council and to the board to determine the top 2 winners. I would now like to pass it over to the 2 members from the Airdrie Board of Youth Affairs.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Callie Wallace. And my name is Alondra Landeros. And we are the members of the Airdrie Board of Youth Affairs. We are here this evening to present to you the 2 winners for the 2017 Mayor for a Day Challenge. In the category for middle school submissions, Cruz Jackson is a successful winner. Cruz's idea is to do a community event as a thank you day for all City of Airdrie firefighters, EMS, RCMP, Byler that work in the City of Airdrie. Cruz identified in his application that this is a low-cost and feasible idea. Cruz's idea involves the schools to come together and make thank you cards and have pictures to share with those first responders. To get the community involved, Cruz would like to open it to where all residents are welcome, and the event would have food trucks, media, and an opportunity for residents to see all the vehicles first responders use. In the category for high school submissions, Jordan Hawes is the successful winner. Jordan's idea is to have a transit program for youth that is free or substantially cheaper. Jordan believes that this idea will benefit middle school and high school students that are getting around the community. Jordan came up with this idea because, as like many other youth, some live out of the area and don't have access to a school bus. Jordan believes that some youth might not have the finances to ride the bus every day. Jordan believes that his idea is a good opportunity for the young people to explore Airdrie and see the programs and fun activities that there are out there, with the help of a barrier-free transit program. We would now like to ask Mayor Brown and Council to join us in congratulating the 2 winners and present them their prize and declare them the official winners of the 2017 Mayor for a Day Challenge.
Lana and Kaylee, just a second, you can't leave yet. So first of all, terrific job in your presentation. I want to thank all of your board members. We had 47 applications, but we had 4 that we had to review, and it was a tough decision, right? I would say that it was very close across the board. So I want to congratulate all the finalists. So we are definitely going to arrange a lunch for the other 2 that came in second, but we're hoping that their ideas, through your leadership, will go forward because they're definitely doable, and I think it's something that we want to work on. But I want to congratulate you and all of your board, and on behalf of all of us on council who were there for the interviews, we want to thank you. It was very well put together, it was very well thought out, and everybody had some great questions. That's what I like the most. You all had some excellent questions that related to their presentations and how applicable they would be to the city of Airdrie. So thank you both, and thank you to your team. Okay, thank you. Lots of pictures tonight, everybody. Holy smokes. Didn't wear any makeup. So we are through appointments and presentations. So I'll take a straw poll from the audience. Who's here to ask a question about the item that's on the agenda around the public question period? Can I see a show of hands? Just a few. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to allow for the presentation to occur, and then we're going to open it up and have a public forum. So if you want to come and comment and share your thoughts with council, you'll have the similar to public question period. We'll allow you to come forward, and you can hear the presentation first, because there may be some things in there that you don't know or you're not familiar with, or you weren't able to read the entire report and some of the details, and we'll allow for that to happen, to occur. So, sorry, Councillor Bellick, you want to make a comment?
Yes, we have to make a motion for Mayor of the Day.
Oh, yes, to receive for information. My apologies.
All right, so I'd like to make that motion that council accepts the presentation of the winners of the 2017 Mayor of the Day Challenge for information.
Excellent. Thank you. All those in favor? That is a unanimous. Thank you very much. So from there, we'll open it up to the floor, public question period. I'd like to come forward, just give your name and your, not your address, but the community you live in, please. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council and city staff. My name is Al Jones. I'm a resident of Meadowbrook with business interests in the city of Airdrie. I'm also a proud contributor to a city board that works on behalf of Airdrie citizens in an advisory role to council, a privilege I've enjoyed for approximately 19 years now. Before I get to my questions, I want to reflect on what I perceive to be not only my responsibilities, but the responsibilities of every resident that volunteers their time, talents, insight, and passion for their community by sitting on one of the City of Airdrie's advisory boards. The volunteer board members themselves are appointed by council as a whole, based on an applicant's availability, talents that might contribute to the board's success, experience, and in some instances, even education. They are not chosen by political affiliation, personal or professional relationship, gender, ethnicity, or ideological beliefs. The diverse background of views, experience, talent, and abilities is what gives value to these boards. Because of this, as board members, we debate and advocate from our own viewpoints. For every member that has a view on a given issue, quite often another member may have a very different view. This sometimes leads to heated debate within boards, but each board member understands that they are all there to act in the best interests of the community as a whole. And because of that understanding, respect is always maintained within that board. Through this process, we trust and believe that council receives recommendations that include any due diligence that council requests of us. This in turn allows council to make informed and educated final judgments or decisions. These volunteers are not compensated in any way, nor do they enjoy public acknowledgement of their service. They truly work for the taxpayers as a whole, simply for the gratification of knowing they contributed to their city. Each board also has a minimum of one city councillor, and in most instances, two. This allows council to always be aware of the work being done by the boards. City staff are also present during these board meetings. They have no vote. Their role is strictly for access to resources, to record the proceedings as a whole, and to provide information at the board's request. With all of these viewpoints, talents, and resources, researched, vetted, and debated, the boards as a whole entity then make their recommendations to council to make final decision on. Now, in order to protect the integrity of these boards, and because the purpose of each board is not to simply support a proposed bylaw or recommendation, but to also play devil's advocate so that we might see weaknesses or shortcomings of a proposed policy, bylaw, or procedure, board members are to feel safe in openly giving their views and exercising their individual votes. They are not to feel pressured by staff or council in any way for or against any issue. This ensures board consensus is then true and proper. Board members are not to fear their position when advocating, debating, or voting. The only reasons I can think of for removing a board member is for lack of attendance, conflict of interest, releasing confidential or in-camera information, acting in one's personal best interest, or outright animosity to fellow board members. Council as a whole, at the formal request of a board chair, then has the prerogative to excuse that board member. This is, in my opinion, the purest form of democracy. Now to my questions. I have two. The first question, did a councillor, without consensus of council as a whole, send a letter to a staff member requesting of that staff member to reprimand a board member and, if necessary, remove that board member because that board member expressed their disappointment in the councillor's behavior and would not be voting for that councillor in the future? And my second question, did a second councillor send an email to that same staff member supporting the request of the first councillor to have that board member reprimanded or removed for similar reasons?
Good questions. I don't know if the correspondence was confidential or not. Sharon, I guess I defer to you on that front.
I assure you, Your Worship, I did not receive my intel from any member of council, any staff member, or any member of the affected board. The fact that I got this information third hand through due diligence tells me that it was already out in the community.
Okay, fair enough. I'll still defer to Sharon. Thank you.
Through the chair, first off, Your Worship, I'm not quite sure how I should respond.
Okay, and I'm with you.
And so we in Legislative Services are not aware of any such correspondence. If it's correspondence between a councillor and a staff member, it would be subject to FOIP legislation, and of course we would be required to sever any personal information in the document. But other than that, the document for the most part would be released in its entirety with that particular personal information severed.
Okay.
But there's formal channels for that to go through.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure where to take it from here. Are you asking for a release of those documents or from comments from said councillor, Mr. Jones?
Well, firstly, I'm kind of disappointed that the two councillors that I referred to haven't spoken up. I'm very disappointed. Secondly, I don't need a FOIP request. I have copies, including the email headers of the two original. I knew the answers to these questions before I answered them.
Yep.
I asked them out of respect to give these two individuals opportunity to come forward and speak on their own behalf.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
So although I'm not going to comment on comments, I have sent an email to the appropriate people because I had concerns with false information being put out in the public sphere. I attested to that fact and asked them to please look into it and get back to us, and I expect that we will certainly see some actions as a result of that. Not prepared to discuss contents or any of those details as you expressed it. Intel, this was a matter that I can speak to personally, but I'm certainly not going to speak to it in a public forum. I will allow the individuals, including the alleged actions in place to take place in a proper forum. So that's my say on it.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Malik.
And through the chair, to answer your first question, Mr. Jones, yes, I did send the letter.
Do either of these councillors think their actions were actually appropriate given the transparency that each of these councillors, I feel awkward even having to force the issue. I have respect for council as a whole, and I know that your jobs are not easy. I understand that sometimes emotions take over, but as leaders, anybody in a leadership role must take responsibility, apologize when they know they're wrong, and allow for it to move forward. From what I saw, I would never treat a staff member within my own organization I would never ask a staff member to reprimand their own supervisor. Staff answers to the boards, not the other way around. I found it very disconcerting that a staff member was asked to reprimand a board member. It is so topsy-turvy and backwards. It's wrong. The process is in place to protect democracy as a whole. We saw through the Airdrie Main Street Square just how riled up the public as a whole got when there was no public input.
Sorry,
when
Mr.
the
Jones,
checks were not put in place.
I don't want to cut you off, but I've been really generous with your time. So if you could summate quickly here. And
I guess in short, I will share my intel with my colleagues in media, and we'll let it go from there. I am disappointed.
Thank you for coming forward. Anyone else who'd like to ask a question of council? Hello. Welcome. Yes, Madeira, can you just turn your microphone on? Thank you.
Hi, Worship and Council members. My name is Nicole Persilo. I'm a member, active member in the community of Airdrie as a volunteer, and I heard that you're getting rid of question period. As a political scientist.
Sorry, so Nicole, we are going to have a public input session.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Just following, yeah, you might have come in after the announcement.
Yeah, I think I did.
So what we're going to do is we're going to have Sharon present, and
okay.
then we're going to open it up to the floor. So if people want to comment, they can. So if you
Okay,
could just hold your question till then, we're good to go.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. It's all good. Thanks for coming forward. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Friends. Good evening. I'm just...
Just come a little closer to the microphone there, please.
I think I got to push my button, right?
No, you're right. You're turned on, yep.
So I just want to read something to you, and I just ask you to respect and listen.
Sorry, if you could give both of your the presenters a name and the community. I know where you are.
Tracy Miller, and I don't want to tell you where I live. Thank you.
Okay.
And Darcy Miller.
Thank you.
In fact, you've met me at my prison before. So some of you are aware of where my prison is. So I would just like to read some things, seeing as this may be the last public question period. I would like to read you some things, and you tell me what you think. So this was posted on Facebook. Racist, loser, stupid, embarrassment, asshole, burn in hell, thieves. This was personally done to us. Invaded our home, cameras mounted on a fence in our bedroom, shining spotlights in 2 different homes in their bedrooms. Whew, sorry. Taking pictures of us in City Hall, piling garbage over and over again in our front door, allowing dogs to run free, post sayings in upper window into our bedroom and on the fence. 3x3 sign that says, "Excuse me, children." Says F you. Gives finger on a weekly basis, taunting, laughing, set up a campground in the vacant lot, rakes and blows leaves on neighbor's lawn, blows horn, shines headlights nightly between 12:30 and 1 a.m., put leaf blower in the face of somebody else, places notes on doors, trespasses, has been in the neighbor's face on multiple occasions, hit neighbor's camera with pull, and now today I face a telescope that sits in their bedroom and looks into my bedroom window. But that, you know, I can deal with all this. But now I have a 2-year-old that I have to look after, and I have promised that I will keep her safe. And I just don't understand. I do not understand why I have to live in this hell. And I am asking all of you, and I am asking all of you to help me. I don't want to be a victim. I want to be a victor, but I can't. I can't do it alone. I need help. We need help. This is how I get through my day. I never took a prescription in my life. Would any of you like to have to live like this? My husband also does the same thing. Another thing I'd like to say, I've just got 3 more things, that these people, their dog and their kid have more rights than I do, than we do. And just about my family. I have told my family that if anything ever happens to me, if me and Darcy end up hurt or I end up arrested because I'm not supposed to be speaking out, and I want all of you to know that I have asked my family to sell my house and take my money and fight for mine and Darcy's and my family's rights. And I just don't know what else to say, but I'm supposed to be quiet, and I'm not supposed to speak out. So, and I'm not supposed to get a restraining order, and I'm not entitled to a peace bond because we don't chase flies with sledgehammers. What I'm supposed to do is be quiet and be a good little neighbor and just put up with this. You know, I haven't been for a walk around the lake where I live in 10 years. I haven't crossed the street in 12 years. I've been told, go slash the person's tires, do this, do that. Have I? I never have. I've refrained from saying or doing anything to these people. These people have lied to the city, which you are aware of, Mayor Brown. I've sent you the correspondence due to the fact of the trailer being parked in the vacant lot, and I sent you a letter via the RCMP that they never had permission to ever park that trailer. And I know that you didn't disagree with that it didn't matter. It was but I feel like my family is facing this, and I blame the city of Airdrie for this. And I blame the city of Airdrie because I had to come here and get that trailer moved. And we were warned by bylaw, do not go to city council. And nobody ever took the time. She said she had permission. They said this, they said that. I hold you, not you, but the city of Airdrie responsible for the assault that took place in my home. And why, and that it got so heated in my neighborhood. And I should have never had to have done that. And I think you agreed with me, Mayor Brown, on that I should have never had to come to city council and have that trailer removed.
So you've said a lot, Tracy, and obviously the issue's been with the RCMP, and I can't comment on anything that the RCMP is doing, any ongoing investigations, what they've done to date. I certainly wouldn't put
the RCMP aren't doing anything. They told me to be quiet. Do not tell anybody. I can only deal with one person. And what they're actually doing, I feel, is setting me up so that I can be charged with mischief as well for making false police complaints. So I can't turn anywhere. I have nowhere to turn. Nowhere to turn. And if I end up dead or hurt, I have asked my family to take my money and come after the city and the RCMP. And that's all I can say.
Yeah, no, I clearly understand that. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry it's come to this, obviously. We've It's been a number of years.
Yes.
And the issues, as you know, there's always three sides to this story, right? Because we get information from everybody that's contrary to the other person's stories, correct? So the issue, when it elevated to where there was issues, that's when the RCMP were called in, and that's where my understanding is right now, where I sit, where council sits, is that they are the ones that are looking after this.
We're not protected.
Actually, no. That was between the Johnstons and the Jacksons. We have never been asked we have never been asked not to speak to council.
No, fair enough.
Yes.
So.
But you did see the pictures of the telescope that is now in my window.
Sir, I have not seen any pictures of a telescope.
There's telescopes in
the last
in
correspondence
the
that I saw was a picture of a spotlight.
Those are telescopes, sorry. I think it's telescopes. It's two telescopes.
That was what was brought forward before. So
yes.
So
we also suffer with spotlights. You name it. It never stops.
Yeah. No. I'm clear on that piece.
And yes, there is three sides to it. But I'll tell you right now, my side is the truth. My side is the truth. My record is clean, and I have no complaints against me on my file.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I understand. So what I would like to, I'll defer to you in just a second. So what I'd like to recommend to you and your husband, first of all, that we met, Paul and myself and yourselves, it was a while ago.
Yes.
That maybe we should sit down and have another conversation and include the fire chief and our new detachment commander. And,
I would love that.
And move forward with something.
As I said, I don't want to be a victim.
No,
I want to be a victor.
So I really appreciate, it takes a lot of courage to come forward and say what you said. And I can't imagine living in that world that you're currently in. As I said, I feel sick for all parties involved. We want to come to some fruitful resolution, as unfortunately that hasn't come to pass, as you both know. And this has been going on, I think, since my first term when Murray was on council with us. So we had that conversation. So I'm just going to defer to Mr. Hunter, and I've extended the question period time because I've had two very impactful statements. But I want to remind everybody that we do have 5 minutes and we need to keep with the schedule.
I just wanted help before there is no question.
I promise you, we will set something up.
Okay.
And my office will be in touch with you in the next coming day.
Thank you.
Next day, okay?
Mayor Brown, I'm the other neighbor on the other
Sorry,
side.
just 1 second. We're going to respond to hear from Mr. Hunter, and then you can start your question, sir. Okay, please? Thank you. Mr. Hunter, go ahead,
So,
please.
through the chair, I can speak to having some conversations with these folks, Mr. Johnson as well. I've never in my entire life seen people as scared to come out of their own houses, to live in their own neighborhoods. I have committed to listening to them, having conversations with them, trying to get an understanding of all of the complexities of this, and then to engaging the right people to have some conversations where we can bring this to what I would term nothing less than peaceful resolution, which it is very complicated. The police have been involved. The police have been, my understanding, is pulled back out. Municipal enforcement's been involved. There are many, many remedies that people have out here in a free democracy. I have recommended and some lawyers that will help them to seek civil remedy if that is the decision that they want. And again, as I said, to go into a neighborhood and watch 3 homes with no trespassing signs and people that are afraid they're going to be maligned, attacked, whether with notes, whether it be physically, to me is absolutely shocking. And so again, as Mayor had alluded to, I'm sure we'll be happy to be part of the conversations that move this forward to get you guys to a safer place. The fact that you have your grandchild there, to me, Airdrie is supposed to be one of the safest communities there. I can assure you we have a new commanding officer that's going to ensure that happens, and I welcome her input. But again, so we are hearing you. we are going to do what we can to get you guys to a better place, bearing in mind that, as the Mayor alluded to, there's all kinds of different sides to these things, but from what I've seen, I've absolutely, I'm an old man and I'm shocked, and I don't get shocked easily. So I'm very shocked that it's been, I believe, 12 years in that neighborhood that this has been going on. It's about time for everybody to sit down and get this thing to a better place. And so certainly looking forward to working with you folks and anybody else to make sure that you guys, again, as you said, don't have to be victims any longer, that you come out victors. And thank you very much for having the courage to come forward. And once again, because this has been in and out of the news over the years, and so I kind of kept an eye on it, but now I really have a good understanding of what's going on, and I'm happy to help do whatever little bit I can to bring this to resolution so that you guys can get on with your lives and raise your wonderful granddaughter and not have to deal with this, and Mr. Johnson as well.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Do you want to talk, Cal?
I'm Cal Johnston. I'm the other neighbor on the other side.
Sorry, Mr. Jones, just come out close to the microphone, please.
I'm Cal Johnston, the other neighbor on the other side of the Jacksons. And I just sent something to Mr. Hunter today about the RCMP's intake. They deny any involvement in the no trespassing sign that I complained about 3 times at City Hall, that bylaw. Namely, Rhonda Day put a law together just tailored for me, no one else in this whole city, just me alone, with all kinds of different rules to take down a sign. I made a complaint because I believe the RCMP was involved. They sent a letter, and they basically threw the city under the bus and said, not us, it was the city that made this bylaw. I was threatened with $10,000 fine. I was threatened that they were going to come onto my property to remove a no trespassing sign that Alberta court judge said I had every right to put up. And I've told Rhonda Day that many times. She won't listen. And now it's come to illegal. I'm down $12,000 because of legal actions, because the RCMP laid all these charges against me and my wife. My wife was assaulted right in front of our house with video evidence, and these guys got away with it. They got away with the assault. They got away with the assault when they went into their house and assaulted them inside their house. And they got away with that, too. Every time they get away with something, they get aggressively worse.
So, Mr. Johnson, I can't comment on those incidents. I wasn't there. I've seen no evidence. I can't comment.
There's lots of evidence.
No, I hear you very clearly. Okay, so the only thing I know right now, and I said it to Tracy and Darcy, was that now they're saying the RCMP aren't involved, but they're going to be, because we're going to have a meeting and hopefully come to some form of resolution. I know that's been tried before. There's a tremendous amount of emotion here. I can't even imagine what you're going through. I don't know all the circumstances. I get bits and pieces of information. I have heard from the other neighbor as well. They're contrary, obviously, to your positions, right? So I don't have all of the details. I can't comment on behalf of my colleagues, but I do know this is with our RCMP, right? Those issues you're talking about are RCMP. They are not City Council. So I can't comment.
The no trespassing is City Council now.
So Paul's going to respond to that piece, because Rhonda's not here, so I'm going to allow Paul to comment, but first we're going to hear from Deputy Mayor Burley.
Thank you, Worship. Without knowing all the details and everything, to me, based on what I heard tonight, this is the perfect example of why we created the anti-bullying bylaw, because it's technically bullying what was said here, if all the facts are there. And so to me, that's where it could be addressed as well, Your Worship.
Yeah, and that certainly was an avenue that was looked at, but I can't recall, because we're going back a number of years from that conversation. But let's hear from Mr. Schultz first on the no trespassing sign. Paul, please.
Just through your worship, and I can't comment specifically on the no trespassing sign. It's certainly something, as we get into discussion, I'll look into. What I can comment is, and as you're aware, the situation escalated to such a point, and I believe it was last summer, that staff were instructed not to deal with this issue, and it was turned over to the police to to
That's
lead
not-
because of where it escalated. But
That is not
if
what
that
the
is
police say
changing,
now.
I will look into that.
Okay.
Okay, it shouldn't. From my point of view, this had been turned over to the RCMP.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to come forward, please? Oh, welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. I'm here to speak to item 12.1, and please forgive me, we got a little mixed up in the audience on the agenda. Is this the right time under question period for how? Okay, thank you. As mentioned, my name is Jane Power. I'm with Urban Systems. I'm pleased to be here tonight in the question and answer period with respect to the two CAS justifications that are before you this evening. Our team has been working with Genesis, Westmark, and Vesta. Our team are all here tonight in support of the process that has been happening, as well as our technical team from Urban Systems. We're very happy with the collaboration that has taken place with the administration, as well as the other landowner that is here before you. And I guess our question is, if you have any questions for us, we'd certainly be pleased to answer them for you.
I don't think that there will be any questions as it relates to the presentation 12.1, but certainly we can call on you if there are any that arise. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming forward. We have time for one more question before we move on, if you'd like to come forward.
Good evening, Your Worship. Hopefully this is not the last question for question period. I came in December 2015 and asked council to look into a competitive sports commission or bylaw so that we can hold events in the city of Airdrie. We're 2017 May, and I don't see it anywhere in the correspondence for when it will come back.
Sorry, Mr. Panini. So definitely it's come back to council probably. Sorry, just a second. Go ahead, Sharon, please.
Your Worship, members of council, if you will recall, we did put it as a question on the citizen satisfaction survey. Those results have now been tallied and been provided to me, and so I will be responding back to council here within the next 2 months.
Sorry, but the information that came, you did make a presentation to
Yes, Your
council
Worship.
around combative sports.
Yes, Your Worship.
And then that's when the extension was made where I think there was I don't know if it was unanimous, but a good portion of council would have wanted to see that on the survey to see how many people would. Okay, so that's where that is, and the information should be back when, sorry, Sharon?
Within the next 2 months.
Within the next 2 months.
Okay. Is there a reason why it vanished from the correspondence for when it would come back so that people
none
know?
that I'm aware of, no.
Oh, okay.
If I
Sorry,
may, Your
Sharon,
Worship.
yes, please.
So as you're aware, the actual results came in the February timeframe, and I was on vacation, Your Worship, so that is the delay.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You were in Hawaii, if I recall. See, I can remember that.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Benini. All right, from there, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move on to 11, business arising. And this is 11.1, and introductions, Councillor Coulson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have Sharon Pollock. She will be speaking to the public question period and motions.
Your Worship, members of council, I have a brief presentation for you on this particular topic this evening. So just a little bit of background. On December 5th, council asked staff to report back, and the question at that time was around impromptu motions coming out of public question period, and is there a better way to support staff and council in responding to questions? So I thought first I'd do a little bit of a background in terms of staff's role and council's role when it comes to particularly a council meeting. So when we look at staff's role, our role is to provide you with accurate information, look at topics that have been fully researched and bring those forward. And as we bring them forward in the staff report format, we will provide you with options. And at the end of the day, as the subject matter expert, we will provide you with a recommendation. In response to a request from Council, the timeline for Council agendas being provided to Council was actually extended, and Council now has almost a full week to review the information, and this is so Council has time to digest that information, ask whatever questions they may ask, maybe touch base with the public, and then be able to have that ability to make a well-informed decision. And so Council goes through that process. They consider all the information that we have provided. They consider the information that they get from their constituents. And then at the meeting, they'll seek clarity where required. And at the end of the day, make a well-informed decision. So the purpose of this report, I just want to state it, is not to eliminate public feedback and participation. And really at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve is to provide for feedback and participation in the right forum. And really as we're going along with that, providing it in the right forum is really providing with Council with the time and ability to make a well-informed decision and not one that actually is requested on the fly. So historically, what's happened with public question period? So really it provides residents with an opportunity to ask a question of Council. And we've experienced over the past where sometimes residents have struggled with a question because they'd just like to provide their opinion on a particular topic. So each person is given 5 minutes, and Council has set aside 30 minutes in total for public question period. And this is all outlined within Council's procedure bylaw. So what are the benefits? So there are a number of benefits to having a public question period. Your residents are able to come forward before Council. They can ask a question. There's no formal process, no procedure required. They can just show up the night of the meeting and ask their question. Provides accessibility to Council, and with that accessibility, I think it provides residents with the opportunity to hold Council accountable for the decisions they make. I also would believe that it enhances that perception of transparency. So on the flip side, what are some of the risks? So some of the risks that Council will experience is you could potentially be asked to act in the moment and provide an immediate response, which can at times allow for inaccurate or incomplete information being provided. I know from staff's perspective, this is the biggest probably concern and fear of staff being called upon to make a response in the moment. Could potentially circumvent existing processes that are in place. It can create inefficiencies both within the meeting and within staff work plans, and also at times it can lead Council to act outside of their own jurisdiction. I did include examples of each of these within the Council report. If you'd like me to go through them, I can, but I thought I would just carry on.
We've all read it, so please carry on.
So what's our current state? Our current state is public question period. So what we're noticing is the questions appear to be growing in both breadth and complexity. And we have received concerns from residents with respect to public question period and a perspective of ineffectiveness in our current public question period process. There has been a request received from a couple of residents within the past few years asking that Council require that questions be done in writing in advance of the meeting. The other thing is we do have questions that come into the organization on a regular basis. They typically come into the various individual departments. They may come in through the mayor's office and the councillor's email box, and they can come directly to legislative services. We do have a process for responding and ensuring that residents are provided with full, complete, and accurate information in our responses. So what are other communities out there doing? So in Grand Prairie, they have what they call a public delegation period, but at the end of the day, if you look at how it actually functions, it functions very similar to our public question period. Red Deer, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat do not have and have not had a public question period, and St. Albert has public appointments. So how their public appointments work is people need to register to speak. They need to submit their question in writing, but that can be done right up until about 5 minutes before the meeting starts. They actually hold two periods, one at the beginning of the meeting because their meetings start at 2 in the afternoon, and one at the end of the meeting. They say they very, very seldom have people come forward for public appointments at the end of the meeting. So Council has a number of alternatives in terms of what they could do with public question period. So you can align or amalgamate the current public question period with our existing delegation and appointment process. So as council will recall, that would require that questions would need to be submitted prior to the meeting, and it would allow time for those questions to be reviewed and perhaps a full and complete information being provided to council so they're able to make that well-informed decision. Second alternative, a number of communities use this particular option, and that is to adopt a notice of motion process. So what that would entail is questions would not be answered on the fly in the moment. What it would require is a councillor would then submit a notice of motion, and that would put that question on a future agenda for formal discussion. What this does is this allows councillors the opportunity to consider, first of all, whether or not they wish to support the motion when it comes forward, and then secondly, whether or not they wish to direct staff to actually research the particular topic. Under a notice of motion process, no action would be taken by staff until they have the full consent of council to proceed to a staff report. The next alternative that you have available to you is to discontinue the public question period. Residents would still have that ability to make an appointment. They would still have that ability to submit questions to council or staff or as a part of correspondence, and then councillors could then bring forward a notice of motion on items that they feel warrant further discussion. One of the things we've noticed over the past few years, and especially over the last little while, is a lot of times your public question period has centered around a particular topic. And so it could be something that's prevalent in the community, it could be a controversial item, but what could be used is we could make better use of our public input or our public information sessions. So what this would do is this would provide your resident with the opportunity to ask questions but also provide their opinions. It is held very similar to a public hearing process. Staff would present, the public would provide input, council would then debate and make a decision. And so one of the things that came to mind for me most recently, even if you take this particular topic tonight, a perfect example, or the downtown visioning that we had at the last meeting, that would have been another one where it would have been a really appropriate time to have a public input session and be able to hear from the public. So it could be established at council's request whenever they see that there is that desire or that need for that opportunity to collect information and opinions from your residents on a particular topic. So the benefits of all three of those alternatives is it would eliminate the request for decisions to be made in the moment. And so it allows both council and staff that opportunity to do research and provide a response. Council has that time to take a look and consider the information to make their decision, and it also gives them time to take a look and consider the resources that may be required to put something into play. And it would also most likely lead to council not making decisions outside their jurisdiction. So the last alternative, of course, is one that's always available to council. Council could maintain the status quo, and as I mentioned, we do have some staff who are really not comfortable responding to questions in the moment, and really it boils down to that fear of not providing accurate and full information to council so they can make that well-informed decision. So if council should decide to make a change, we would work with our corporate communications department to ensure that the public is aware of any change and to really help them understand the various ways they can reach out and contact council. And at this point, staff are recommending that we discontinue the public question period, we make greater use of our public input sessions, and we adopt a notice of motion process for those spontaneous resolutions or issues that council would like to see put on a future agenda. This, of course, would require that we would need to make amendments to our procedure bylaw, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Sharon. Questions for Sharon, please. We're going to do questions for Sharon if there is any. Sorry, Councillor Chapman, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, with this recommendation to discontinue the public question period, but adopt a notice of motion for spontaneous resolutions, is that spontaneous resolutions coming from council or spontaneous resolutions that would come through public question period?
It would actually come through, through the chair. It would come through a couple of different methods. So it would not come through a public question period process, but what it would do is should council get a piece of correspondence that they feel should be brought forward and direction provided to staff for a report. It could be something that comes out of a board member report. It would probably be more likely that they would come from those forums.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter.
So through the chair, I guess it's not lost on me that today is May Day, a pretty significant holiday in other parts of the world where some rights maybe have been taken away, etc. A couple of questions that I have. It says, further, city staff have been contacted by a few residents who have specifically commented that they find PQP, public question period, to be ineffective. Can you tell me what that number is by a few?
Oh, literally just a few, probably no more than 3 or 4.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the challenge that I have, and so it says questions may result in a misuse of council time when they're about issues over which council has no jurisdiction or a question is not involved. I'm not understanding why there's an assumption in this report, or maybe on behalf of a lot of citizens, that because someone asks a question today that staff or anybody should be providing an answer today. To me, as we heard, some folks came forward, asked some questions. We've committed to doing some more talking about it, doing some more research, coming back and perhaps finding a better outcome. So we've had many questions where, so the minute that we say we're going to have a proper process, we're going to have a proper format, it's going to make really good sense to the people that have to answer the questions and some of us that ask the questions. But in my mind, it scares a lot of the citizens away. The forum for them to be able to walk through the front door, and many of them have been nervous, and they've said, I'm nervous, I'm not good with public speaking, but they get it out and they get their question asked and they're looking to us to provide some kind of a direction. And sometimes it's just a matter of, are you listening? Not that they want us to solve the problems of the world, but are we listening? And so in my mind, when we take away that piece that says, we're going to listen, but we're going to listen in a way that makes sense to staff and to perhaps people that have been on council, whether it be one term or whatever that may be, we're going to listen, but you have to come forward in a manner that makes sense to us. To me, defeats the whole purpose of the ability of having public question period. I value the questions. I don't always agree with a lot of the questions and those types of things, but I absolutely value the ability for people to come through the doors and ask those questions in a fashion that is non-threatening and comfortable to them. I can tell you for sure I've had conversations over the last week since we were advised that the recommendation would be coming forward, that many people are very afraid to get into a process-driven question period or any of those types of things, because that's not the world that they exist in. They just want to put a question out there and let us come back to them with that. So again, if you can speak to where does the assumption come that I don't recall anybody on this council asking questions to be answered immediately. Many times we've heard with staff reports when I've asked questions, we've heard from staff, we don't have that information available, we'd be happy to get back to you at another time. We use that very frequently from staff and council. Why wouldn't the same assumption be made if it's a public question?
Sorry, Sharon, do you want to respond or no? It's up to you.
Through the chair, the only comment I would make is that experiential through the past many public question periods, there seems to be a sense of a need for an immediacy to a response.
Okay.
So,
sorry, I want to just preamble you here. So we are opening it up to public input, so I don't want you to, presume what everybody's going to come forward and speak to. Right. I do want to comment, so 2 examples tonight. So if everyone doesn't know the procedural bylaw, I'll tell you have a half an hour for public question period. Since a year and a half ago, I believe, we had 1 or 2 or 3, sometimes 4 people that came forward. was very infrequent. As Mr. Benini, he's normally up and down. He's not doesn't usually take his 5 minutes. He has quick questions. Other people a little bit longer. Tonight we saw two people, Mr. Jones, Mr. and Mrs. Miller. I gave them more than the 5 minutes because I felt they needed to have more of the 5 minutes. So I take ownership for allowing this to go a little further because I can't interrupt somebody when they're talking about the things that they're talking about as passionately as they were. So I'm sort of at fault for this, for allowing more, but I'm also of the belief that, yeah, I'm not going to say what I'm in belief of until I hear from the public. So if you have another question for Sharon, or you're okay with me opening up to the public and then coming back for the question, it's up to you, Councillor Hunter. So
I do have a couple of concerns. So first thing, I will reflect on the fact that yes, more and more people are coming forward. We're a city of more than 60,000 people, and we're going to get a lot more questions. We're going to have a lot more concerns from a lot more people. So it stands to reason. This is no longer a small town. You know, back in the day, it used to be okay. In my mind, if there's enough questions, this council chambers belongs to our citizens, not to council, not to staff. We are here doing the business of our citizens, and there is nothing more, in my mind, responsible than making sure that democracy is answered. I may not like the question, but I have a duty of care to the citizens out here to respond to that question, and I don't have to respond to it today. So is there any requirement in any of these jurisdictions that you've seen where they said an immediate answer needed to be forthcoming?
Through the chair, we did not specifically ask that question.
Thank you.
No, all I would add is we all feel that way. So now, sorry, Mr. Schultz, your light is on. You'd like to make a comment.
Yes. Through your worship, if I could just comment and just be very clear of what motivated this staff report. And it was upon the direction of a motion of council to look into options for dealing with public question period and spontaneous questions. Obviously, it was a motion of council, so it was supported to have us do that. Staff did come back with research and options. And as we usually do, we make a recommendation based on the information that's in front of us, not on the political aspects.
Excellent, thank you. So we'll now open it up to a public question period, or sorry.
Can I, just a point of clarification.
Public input session, and sorry, a point of clarification, Councillor Hunter.
So through the chair, point of clarification. So in the report, it says council requested staff report back with options for dealing with impromptu motions. Can you define impromptu? And so public question period and impromptu motions in my world are two different things. A motion can come because of a question from staff, but it says an impromptu motion, and we're coming back with recommendations as to how to deal with that. In my mind, we've got recommendations the recommendation is to withdraw public question period, but we're doing it because we're trying to deal with impromptu motions. Motions get voted on. We all have the ability to vote them down or vote them in, and so I'd like a little clarification on that, please.
How the word impromptu motions was interpreted was that meant resolutions that were coming out of public question period that had no report attached to them, and they were a resolution that was made in the moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Public input session is open. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening. I do have copies of my presentation.
Absolutely. If you could just come over and grab them. If you want to take your seat and start your presentation, that would be great. And just your name, please, for the record. And if you want to put the community you live in.
Yeah, my name is Rick Sweet. I live in the community of Edgewater in Airdrie. And just, I wanted to speak specifically to the point that Mr. Hunter just made. The original motion back in December 5th, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, clearly, yeah.
Was that council directs staff to report back with options for dealing with impromptu motions coming through public question period. And you I think all of you have indicated that you've read the report already. Do any of you feel that this response is what you were expecting from the city administration? Or would you not agree with me that the administration in the preparation of this report has either entirely misunderstood the direction that was given to them or has arbitrarily taken it upon themselves to expand the nature of the request from City Council that initiated this report? I would suggest that City Council was not looking for a means to shut down question period or to otherwise put up hurdles to prevent public engagement, but rather you were simply seeking out what options might be available to Council if and when an impromptu motion is brought forward, such as if you don't have the information on hand. Throughout this report, the staff has never once addressed impromptu motions. They have instead focused on questions in general, because the questions in general being raised in the public question period, in their words, appear to be growing in both breadth and complexity. They are fearful that Council and or the city staff might be put on the spot, or that Council might be asked about issues that are outside of their jurisdiction. Again, I have to emphasize they are referencing questions only, not impromptu motions. I just want to remind you that public question period has been a formal part of the agenda for Airdrie City Council meetings for quite a number of years. On the city website, I can go back to November 2012, and I'm sure it goes back much longer than that. I've not researched all those meetings, but I do note that in the past 9 months, there has only been one impromptu motion on record as a result of a question from public question period. That motion, made November 7th, 2016, was ultimately carried and adopted by Council. So I'm not really sure what the big hassle is, but in my opinion, administration has severely overstepped their role in recommending that public question period be discontinued. By definition, the primary purpose of public question period is to seek information from the governing body, which is you guys, and to call the governing body to account for its actions. As one politician said, we're dealing with public business using public funds. The public's got a right to ask. Public question period is a real opportunity for you to demonstrate to us regular citizens your openness, transparency, and accountability. In conclusion, and I am finishing, I will urge you that you recognize that this report does not address the issue that was at hand on December 5th. I believe the correct course of action here is for Council to toss out this report and advise staff that they did not properly address the issue that was given to them. Otherwise, if you really think a vote is deemed necessary, I would certainly hope that you select option number 4. That is to say, Council should choose to maintain the status quo. Meetings would continue in their present format. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweet. Welcome.
Does anyone care to answer that question? Was this the report that you were expecting?
So I'm going off of memory because that's all I have to go off. I didn't look at the, I had the same question when I saw that on the agenda. I wasn't here to, I get to review the agenda, but I was away, unfortunately, so I didn't see it. That was my question. And then I got clarification. From what I understand, there was a conversation that we all had, and there was a motion that Councillor Coulson made. And in my mind, it encompassed a lot of things. Whether it was specific to this or not, I can't be clear on it because I don't recall exactly what was said in the moment at that time. I cannot answer that question.
That it was about impromptu motions.
Okay. I'd have to defer to you because I don't know, because I can't recall, but I will commit to you that I'll go back and I'll have a look at the video stream and see exactly what the conversation was. But I would say that I have.
That's the motion on record.
So I'll say as the mayor, I have tremendous confidence in our administration. Okay, every business can look and say that this is wrong or that's wrong or whatever. This city is well run and well managed. I don't believe there was ever an intent from anyone to throw the wool over my eyes or anybody else, because as we clearly saw at the last meeting, council has this to say. So it's now in front of us. They've provided options. I can guarantee you that the options have been provided. You don't think that our administration ever wrestled with this? I can guarantee you that they have. They've provided the options, And in my mind, I don't believe there was absolutely any intent whatsoever on their behalf to not answer the question or to follow the motion. That's my personal opinion, Mr. Sweet. And we'll see what the rest of council has to say. I see Mr. Hunter, or sorry, Councillor Coulson, you go first, please.
Thank you, Worship. So through the chair, I can answer as it was my motion that was made. The motion came out of legal fees that the city incurred in an impromptu motion that we could have dealt with in-house versus going out for thousands of dollars to consult with outside legal. Basically, we were asking for a better procedure to deal with motions that were brought forward to council, or even within our own council when, say, a council member feels that they need to make a motion and we don't have notice of that motion. So I do feel that the report was really well done. I don't know necessarily that I agree with the recommendation. We'll debate that later, but I do feel that it did encompass everything that I was going for when I made the motion.
Thank you. You hit the nail on the head. Thank you for enlightening me. Councillor Hunter, please.
So through the chair, in answer to Mr. Sweet's question, I expected a report back on impromptu motions. I was quite surprised to see that one of the remedies was to remove public question period. I was quite surprised. So, and that's why I've had these conversations.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome. Oh, I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor Burley.
Just one quick comment, Worship. Whether I support the motion or not, that'll come forward. But as far as overstepping their bounds, when we make a motion to staff, I expect them to go above and beyond what I've asked for, to provide more. Like if they come along something that we hadn't thought of, I want to see that in the report. It gives me more options, and I expect our staff to do that, and they rarely surprise me when they don't.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Worship. Through the chair, staff did come back with a report that we asked them to come back with. They have given us options, and they have made a recommendation. The recommendation that they've made, whether I agree with it or not, that'll be left to be seen, but they did give us some good options to still maintain public question period with modifications. And I think that we have had a lot of meetings where the question can be answered right now. It's a simple yes or no question. That can be answered. But then there is other questions that are answered or that are asked that we do need time to answer. And we have before made a motion for staff to bring back information, and it has come back to us. So there is an option on the board here that I probably will be supporting.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Levinson, welcome. There you go.
So I don't know how many question periods I've been at, but over the years, quite a lot. And they've worked really well, mostly because the mayor handles the discussion. And he can either answer it or he can tell people, we'll take it under advisement, I'll get back to you. There haven't been a lot of serious problems with it in my observation. On a second point, a few times when the conversation has gone beyond the 5 minutes, it's because councillors have taken up the time and you've used your discretion to allow the speakers to have some time for this.
I understand that as well. Absolutely. But that just goes to show you in my mind that there should be some protocol. Do we have an egg timer up here and cut you off in mid-sentence? I don't think so. But there is a way that we have to figure this out, and I'm just not clear on what it is. I haven't attended St. Albert's meetings, but I know the mayor said we have public question period at the beginning or the end. But you have to register ahead of time. You just register. So at least there can be a preamble. When we know ahead of time if there's a specific issue coming, and I'm doing exactly what you just said we do, so sorry about that. but I'm trying to explain that at the end of the day, you want to be prepared. And oftentimes, I get asked a question, and I'm as blank stared as you saw me this evening. There's some very difficult questions to have an answer for, as you saw in the first two presenters. Okay, so you can't just pull it. It would be nice to know ahead of time what those questions might be, an email or something to the mayor's office to say, I'm coming in, this is going to be my question, and just a bit of a preamble so that we're not caught off guard, and then we can have the information in a public area. But right now, that doesn't exist. So I'm hoping that's part of the conversation. But I hear you clearly. Thank you for attending as many meetings as you do, sir. You've been here for 7 years, and I don't know if you were here before, but you come to all of our meetings, and we appreciate it very much.
So I was just going to say on the discussion point, if a citizen comes in with a question that engenders that kind of conversation among the councillors, obviously it's a point that everybody's interested in and needs to be dealt with. And I don't know if anybody comes here expecting to come up with a question from nowhere and expect a complete answer from you.
Nope.
I think you handle them saying, we'll get back to you. And I haven't heard anybody saying, that doesn't work. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Levinson. And I'm sure your garden is getting ready to explode. Welcome. You got to turn your microphone on, please.
Good evening. Nicaila Barton, I'm in the area of Canals. I heard the comment made earlier about, the number of people coming forward to public question period is increasing. Isn't that just fantastic? That the community is engaging with the 7 of you at a higher rate than we've ever seen, that the community feels comfortable in approaching our city council instead of having to go through appointments and processes. They're comfortable to come in here. There's ladies and gentlemen like Tracy who came in here who were terrified for 14 years, who have come to council, have never really, engaged in that sort of way, but felt safe enough to come in here and ask for help. That is so critical, and it is so important for our community to know that City Council is a safe, approachable place where we are open for discussion. Nobody is laughed at. Everybody is addressed, and everybody has felt that their voice matters. They are an equal party in this city. It is not council and citizen. We are a community. You have been elected by the community to listen to us. And I am very thankful actually tonight in how you dealt with Tracy. Seeing that was absolutely outstanding, and that is exactly what the City of Airdrie and what council is for. So thank you very much for that. And I do hope that you consider option 4 and leaving it as status quo, leaving it as is, and allowing us that last bit of freedom to come in here. Doesn't matter if we register, email ahead of time, whatever the case may be, we can walk in here with all the confidence in the world knowing that we will be heard. So thank you so much.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome. There she comes. I was wondering where you went.
I was in the back. Sorry for the beginning, but I'm an active member in the community of Airdrie, and I love my city. And one of the things that I love the most about Airdrie is that I feel that we have a strong...
Sorry, my dear, you need to give your name again, sorry, for the record.
Nicole Persilo.
Thank you.
And I feel that we have a really strong community, and that one thing I really love about our city is that we are able to come to council and pose questions and ask questions. However, as a citizen, I'm actually quite concerned because I'm a political scientist, and even in federal politics or provincial politics, the politicians are allowed to have some time to compose answers and make decisions. And I think we need to find a balance between having good governance and also citizens being heard. So I feel that actually some of the options that were proposed tonight should be further researched, because I think there are other cities that do things that will allow a balance. So I hope you take that into consideration.
Thank you, Nicole. Oh, sorry, I think Mr. Councillor Hunter would like to say something to you. Nicole.
So absolutely, I support that. No. Congratulations on your graduation. Now you come out and you get to be a taxpayer. Welcome. But again, that's exactly it. There are other jurisdictions. There is processes in place. Taking it away is never a good thing. And so taking away a voice is never a good thing. Adding to the voice, tweaking the voice, having conversations and getting to a better place. Yes, we've got a big city. We're going to have more voices. How do we get there? Not taking it away, that just doesn't work.
Thank you. Point taken. Welcome. No, Tracy, you have to shut the other. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Thank you.
So my fear is that, it's Tracy Miller, my fear is that had I sent you an email or had I contacted the city, being what we're going through, would it actually come to council? Would I be able to speak? Or would it just be filed under a ignore or go somewhere else? And I appreciate the opportunity to come here and ask for help. And so my fear is that because of our situation, that it would be filed in garbage or go here or go there, and we would be in the exact same position that we were in before we came. And that's, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship. Mohammed Benini. Your Worship, I'm against this recommendation for council because I'm always here for public question. I have nothing to do on Mondays, and you take it out, you're going to ruin my Mondays. The agenda comes out on a Tuesday or on a Wednesday, so if you were to take off question period, when would citizens be able to put in a question? If they read the agenda on Tuesday, it will be too late to put it in because we have a deadline on the week before to put in what we have to come. So that's why there's a lot of residents here that came in today because they saw the agenda and are using their rights to come up and speak against what was recommended. I grew up in the city of Montreal. My family relatives were in Montreal since the 70s. I don't believe any of them have ever stepped foot in the city council of Montreal because they probably were scared to talk to councillors or to have their voices heard. But you see Montreal, they have bridges falling, they have a lot of problems, a lot of infrastructure problems because citizens weren't standing up against administration and staff and politicians and keeping them honest and doing their jobs. And that's what residents are here for and taxpayers are here for, is to make sure that if they see something wrong with council or staff, I'm not saying staff or council are doing anything wrong. They might not know that they're doing something wrong, but a resident might know and might feel that his tax money is not going in the right places and should be heard, just like many residents came and spoke against Main Street Square. Many times I came here and spoke against the taxi bylaw, which was changed without me having a public input. So I used public question to voice my concerns because I never had a public input like we have here for tax for this. So I would really appreciate it if we can keep our freedom of speech as residents and be able to speak our minds at question period the way that we have it here right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Benini. Welcome. Mr. Herdman, welcome.
My name is Absalom Richard Douglas Herdman, 1840 Meadowbrook Drive in Airdrie. I've been coming to question period for a long time, and I think Canada needs some history, a history lesson. It's our 150th birthday? Yeah, happy birthday, Canada. Once upon a time, my best friend, Ken Thompson, taught me how to come to question period. And I think that very first meeting, I tested the Robert's Rules of Order that I learned at Toastmasters Club, and I was thrown out. And I went back home and told my wife, and she was aghast. And she said, you have to go back immediately and apologize. We'll just add a little bit of history here. If you go to England, York Minster exists. It's 700 years old. Councils have been existing in England for this very reason, for the citizens to voice their opinions, and wars have been fought over that. So councils have a long history in England, and procedures have been established. Now let's wind the clock forward to, let me just check my notes, 1863. There was a man named Henry H. Robert. Now, I did a little bit of this history skit at a Toastmaster speech years ago on Vancouver Island before it was actually U.S.-Canada turf and it was divided up. The story has it, it was owned by the Hudson's Bay Company. And there was a Canadian there with a pig. And then there was an American citizen, and they had a fight. And the British dispatched 7 warships, and there was a war, but it was aborted. And that's in our history notes. Now, the person that officiated at that war was Roberts. Now, he went home, and he, apparently the history in his family is his father is a pastor. And he was officiating at a church meeting, and everybody started to fight. Now, we can't have meetings unless there's rules. So that's how Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Order was established, and our honorable mayor is the chairman of the board, and he can have anybody right out of the meeting. He can make the rules as he deems fit, and that's an excellent process. So while he sits there, he is the sergeant at arms, as in the House of Commons. So this is very, very, very important. The last piece to council has to make a decision here. I want to get on the agenda to speak to Mayor Nemsey since it's an election year. And so I've spoken to the City of Calgary a number of times, but it's very, very complex. You got 1.6 million people, you have standing committees, it's more complex than this city, and there's routes to go through. My question might have to go through 3 different subcommittees to get to the mayor, and that's an understandable process. Now, I have another question that I want to ask the mayor tonight, and I may be able to ask him, but it actually involves the Rocky View Township and the city of Airdrie when the annexation process went through. Now, council can't possibly answer that question because it involves the Municipal Government Act, but I want to go to Rocky View Township. So I rang them up, and they don't have a public question period at all. They've never had one. Never in the history of Rocky View have they had, and there's 40,000 citizens that live there. But they do their business, they do everything.
So you can get on the agenda there.
Yeah, you can get on.
You have a presentation to make, because we've done it as a municipality.
Yeah, so there is a process.
Just 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Yeah. If you
Can I? I've composed a very, very important question, Your Worship, that involves actually our commanding officer from a conference that I attended on the weekend with domestic violence, and I just would like to read it out because it's very, very, very important.
So how much time do you need?
About 1 minute to read the question, and I don't expect an answer.
Well, would it be possible to submit the question? Or
yes, it's a specific question.
Can we submit it and then move on to? Who else wants to make a comment as it relates to this issue on the public input?
Oh, I can.
Okay, if there's no other hand showing, Mr. Herdman, you go ahead and read your letter. You have a minute and a bit.
Okay. My question. Just read it. I attended a domestic violence workshop from Dr. Kathy Carter-Snell, registered nurse, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, a Master of Nursing, and a PhD. She's a professor at Mount Royal College on Saturday at the Daybreak Church. Only 23 people attended. The sexual assaults, and she's a member of court reporting. She's a forensic scientist as well. She said that the number of sexual assaults in Airdrie N equals 700. She is appointed by the court as a forensic expert. Only 10% of sexual assaults are reported in evidence-based science, and she said that N in Airdrie equals 7,000. And she just made it as sort of an aside, that's why she's here in Airdrie talking. Acting Commander Chad Fournier of the RCMP reported at question period SA equals 30, and that happened on March the 20th. My conference covered intimate partner violence and domestic violence as well, because the professor said that all 3 have a continuum. She also said that a team approach is required in the city. Recalling Constable Fournier's comments, he said a team needs to be assembled in our city. I still remember his comments. I look forward to Commanding Officer Kim, who is female, and she brings a new dynamic to this, working with Professor Kathy at MRU, because the professor is appointed by the court. She has access to the facts and details, and she can get solutions for IPV, SA, and domestic violence in the city, and work with our new commanding officer. So my question follows from this. Airdrie has 0 crisis emergency housing. It is not the mandate of Airdrie Housing Limited or Community Links to have emergency housing for our women and orphans. Will Council contact Premier Notley and obtain an order in Council mandating that Airdrie obtains this shelter? Now, there's an example that we can't.
So thank you for the question. I'm not going to answer at this moment, but we do have, so we've done an extensive survey on domestic violence as it relates to our community and the surrounding area. I believe that'll be coming back to council, Paul. The 15th, sorry, of this month? Oh, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Through
Paul,
your
please.
worship, there is a formal staff report bringing back the research projects, and one of those topics was domestic violence in our community. It is coming back to the next council meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Herdman. Appreciate that very much. So I'll close the public input session and let everyone know that your voices were heard. We'll go around the table. We know what the options are in front of us. Who would like to start out? Councillor Chapman, please.
I'll start, Your Worship. I see some similarities here between number 2 and number 4. Number 4 being to maintain status quo, just keep it the way it is. I see a similarity with number 2 being we could choose to change public question period, so answers, they've got it worded here as requested. I would like to see that required. Are not required in the moment and adopt a notice of motion process. So if we feel that the question that does come forward, a member of council could make that notice of motion to bring that back. We do that now. So that's where I'm confused here. Those two are just about the same. I wouldn't want to get rid of public question period. I think lately we've seen a lot of public question period become more public statement periods. I think that has to be, I don't know how it could be dealt with, or just made it known that it is a public question period, not a public statement period. But I would support it to change public question period. So the questions, so it's stated that it's not required an answer right now, just so it is known out there.
Yeah, and I guess the other piece is that I remember the community standards bylaw. We had a lot of public input for that, but then other bylaws, we didn't have that assigned to it. So we have to really look at how we present some of that information, especially around the waste and recycling bylaw. I believe the animal control bylaw, we did have public input, quite a bit of it, extensive actually. So we just have to figure that piece out. Councillor Hunter, please.
So, through the chair, I guess I don't see any reason to change what we have here. I think perhaps the changing needs to be done on this side of the bench, not on that side of the bench. So perhaps the solution is for us to make sure that, once again, we don't put anybody in a spot to ask impromptu questions that can't be answered, etc. So in my mind, as Councillor Chapman alluded to, we don't ask a lot of those questions and make impromptu motions unless there's something glaringly, obvious that we can solve. And so it would be incumbent upon us to work within what we already have in place and tighten it up a little bit. But I don't see any need for wholesale changes. It's working. Citizens are comfortable with it. I haven't seen any. I've seen lots of attempts for people to want to do things that have not been in what we consider a fair process. We've been able to go back to staff and ask staff, can you come back with more information? Staff have done the same with us, said we will come back with more information. I'm not prepared to answer that question because I don't have all the information needed. That works. It's continuing to work, and I see no reason to do anything other than we've heard what staff recommendations are. We've heard from the public, and in my mind, it's not broken. And so if anything needs to be fixed, it's on this side of the bench and not on that side.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Yes, Councillor Bellick, go ahead, please.
Thank you, through the chair. As we've heard tonight, the public question period is mostly directed by the mayor. And there's been some instances where he said, we'll get back to you on that particular topic. Or there's been other instances when the mayor's called a director of the city up and made him or her aware of that or to answer that question, because we don't have the old answers up here. And if that director doesn't have the answer, then the mayor would say to the director and who was ever at the table at the time, get together and come upon a resolution on besides that. So that's part of it. And the other one is the mayor will say, well, can you submit the questions? Well, that's already taking into account a lot of this that's in the report already. So I don't see a problem with the public question period as is right now, because it is mayor directed. Thank you.
Excellent. Deputy Mayor Burley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not in favor of getting rid of public question period. I do think we need to tighten it up a bit, though. When it goes on for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then you have to make other important decisions at 10:30, 11 o'clock, I think that can affect the quality of the decision because of being tired or whatever. And I don't blame your worship for that. We've had some passionate discussions here, and they needed to go on longer. Maybe in those instances, we need to set up the public input sessions to do that. But there are times when you don't realize what issue is going to be the lightning rod that brings everybody out. We've had that before where the recommendation made sense, everything was perfect, and all of a sudden you got 50 people in the audience that are against it, but you didn't hear that side before. So it's really hard to plan a public input session. I'm leaning more toward option 2. We do answer, but we want to make sure that the public knows answers aren't required in the moment. We will get you an answer, but it might not be that night. And we don't want the expectation there that you leave that you didn't get responded to, so you didn't get your answer. You will get it. It might not be till the next meeting, but you will get the answer. And that's why I like option 2, where the question's asked, and if we can answer it that night, we answer it. If we can't, we make a notice of motion to get it back for the next council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Coulson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I would say that we are seeing more of a public statement period versus a public question period. I don't know what sparks people to not send in the email. I heard tonight maybe they were worried it wasn't going to be answered or read, and that's really unfortunate. I think that's something on our part that we need to do a better job of responding. We do, just so that the public is aware, if all of council gets an email, 1 or 2 of us might say, I have no problem discussing it. We may divert to the mayor or just send it straight to city staff because it's something easy as far as a recycling question or why my utility bill didn't come, that kind of a thing. I don't think that status quo is the answer. I think we need a procedure as far as motions goes. I know I've made impromptu motions that have thoroughly confused staff and have been supported by council. So I understand that side of the coin. Actually, one of my motions is on as an example of something that was thoroughly confusing, so thank you for that, Sharon. But I think we do our best to try to direct staff to come back with what we would consider more information. And I wouldn't want to see a notice of motion tie our hands to say, well, we give that notice of motion, it's not supported, so we're not going to go forward with it. So I don't know what the right answer is there. I do believe we should keep question period, but maybe we should be limiting it to the 5 minutes per person to a half an hour. And Your Worship, you're doing a great job of saying who is here to speak to this issue. And if we see the need to open a public input session, I think we can do that. You can do that as the chair. It worked really well here tonight. It worked with the animal control bylaw, that kind of thing. So again, I'm looking, I guess it's my motion to make at this point, but we still have a few more comments to be made.
I think one more, Councillor Hunter. Thank you, Councillor Coulson.
So through the chair, again, I keep hearing that it's on this side of the bench that there's some issues. That side, the public has no problem coming forward and addressing us. We do have the ability to at any time. So if it is too late and we are too, and as Deputy Mayor Burley alluded to, if we're making decisions late into the night and it's affecting the quality of the decision, we all have the ability to table that motion and bring it back at another time when better decisions can be made and more information is required. So we do have in the existing process with tabling motions to do those things, and we certainly, that's not taking that away. If we remain status quo, the nice thing about status quo is it's working for the citizens. If it's not working for us, again, I would say that it's on this side of the bench we need to do the tweaking, not on that side.
Point taken. So Sharon, you've been there a while. Sorry about that. Thank you for waiting. So appreciate all of the options for sure. As you know, for the first 5 years I was here, we had a limited amount of people come forward. We had a sparse crowd. There was a small amount of people, unless there was a public hearing or something of significance. We just didn't have a lot of people participate. So I give the freedom of the person to come forward and talk. I'm all about open democracy. I heard it a couple of times from several people. The door is open. It's always open. It's your hall. You bought it. You paid for it. We work for you. All of those points we all agree on. I'm supportive because I think it's worked for, I look at the whole 7 years. I think the public question period has worked very well. Yes, there's been times a statement. So Mr. Jones, he had to preamble what he had to say. So I allowed that. He was making the statement, but he was making a statement surrounding his question. He wanted to make a point before he offered the question. The same with the Millers. They had to talk about what was going on in their lives in order to ask the question, so that we got a real good understanding of exactly what it is they're grappling with, right? So I'm supportive of keeping option 4. I believe that I recognize there's some challenges with it, but I also believe that if we keep option 4, that we look at making certain that if we have any kind of significant bylaw, that the same rules apply to that bylaw, which is the public input session should be attached to it, and whomever is the chair of that meeting, they have the option to say, just like I did tonight, I spoke to Sharon earlier and said, you know what, there's probably a lot of people coming to talk about this. Why don't we just open it up? Or the recommendation came from Sharon. And that's the way I think it should be done. So I'm for 4, and then, making sure that when we have these big issues coming forward, that we open it up at that issue, or we create something around it. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm supportive of option 4. I would like to keep it the same. So from there, Councillor Coulson, please.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So I guess I would say that I'm supportive of keeping public question period. However, I do feel that we need a procedure of some kind for notice of motion, because we have seen motions come out of public question period. Whether they come right during public question period or they come later in board member reports, they do come out of public question period. I like the idea of a notice of motion. I'm guessing staff are going to have to go back and come back with an actual procedure, a bylaw for us to approve. So I would recommend that we keep public question period as is, 5 minutes per person, 30 minutes. If there is a preamble, if there is a story that needs to be told, I don't know if we can tighten that up a bit and let the public know that we're here to answer your question. If you have an in-depth story that you want to be heard, question period is not really the time for that. Letting them know ahead of time.
Yep.
Yeah. I understand exactly what you say of the 2 instances tonight. You want to hear what they have to say, and that's up to the discretion of the chair. And if that needs to be revisited at a later date, then so be it if it gets out of control. But we have been here for 2 hours for public question period, and that's too much. That's not respecting our procedures or even staff's time to be here. If the same thing is repeated over and over again for 2 hours, it's not effective use of tax dollars. But so I would make the motion that we keep question period as is, with a commitment from those on this side of the table to try to stick a little bit more with our procedures, and that we direct staff to look into what it would mean for a notice of motion, how that will come about, and come back to us with I guess it would be a procedural, would it be a bylaw, Sharon? Would it be a procedural bylaw?
Through the chair, yes, it would require an amendment to the procedure bylaw.
Okay, then so be it. So moved.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Sorry, Councillor Hunter.
Clarification, please.
On which? On the motion.
Motion with the amendment.
So the motion as presented is, sorry, I don't have the motions in front of me. My laptop shut down.
So the motion would be to keep question period as is, 5 minutes per person, allow a 30-minute time frame for public question period.
So no change, yep.
So no change to what we have now, with a commitment from council to sort of keep on top of that, so that everybody has the time to have their say, and exactly what the chair did tonight, which was ask, is there going to be public input on this issue specifically, and then deal with it at that time after the presentation's been made, so that we're not repeating questions if those answers could have been answered in the report already. And then just direct staff to come back with a notice of motion. If there is a motion that needs to be made that is not on the agenda, we all need to have as much
This is a long motion, you know that, right?
Well, he asked for clarification, and I thought I was very clear.
I'm watching Carrie over there going, how are we going to put this in the minutes?
I thought I was clear at the beginning. I thought staff were clear. So
Yeah.
I guess, Councillor Hunter, I don't know how much more I can clarify for you, but we all need to be prepared when we're making a motion on council, and I think that we need to know what the implications of that are, which is where my original motion came from. We incurred thousands of dollars in legal fees. We have made motions that didn't make a whole lot of sense to the public, or that maybe didn't make a whole lot of sense, period. It was like a non-motion. So just in order to have those notice of motions is important.
Okay, sorry, Councilor Hunter.
Yep, so I understand. We're the motion on the floor is option 4. I can say that when the Legion came forward and gave us a nice preamble to asking to look at all the implications surrounding moving the cenotaph, that was a good motion that was respecting the people that put their lives on the line for democracy, and I had absolutely no, that was an impromptu motion that made sense to the citizens, made sense to those that have put their lives on the line, and I have no problem supporting those. And again, my commitment is that I'm not going to put motions on the floor that have little value to the citizens that I serve. So happy to support motion 4.
Okay, sorry. So motion 4 as amended, or just motion 4?
There was no amendment that I'm understanding. We've made a commitment to do a better job up here, but it was status quo.
I did make an amendment
that
we would come back with some sort of a procedural bylaw for notice of motion.
As it related to the initial request, where we had a resident come forward and the city incurred costs, as it related to a motion of council, because we didn't have all the information, we reacted to the question, and we ended up incurring costs that we most likely could have answered in-house. So that all the clarification we're asking for is everything stays the same, but we lean over to the experts and say, okay, so how would you like to see this motion going forward so that there are no negative impacts until we better understand the issue, I think is what you're saying. Okay, sure. Thank you. You're okay with that? Perfect.
If I may, Your Worship?
Oh, you may. As long as it's not contrary to everything, we'll start all over.
I'm sorry. I just want to be really clear on what a notice of motion process would look like.
Yes, please.
So for instance, if we take the example that Councillor Hunter gave, Councillor Hunter would give a notice of motion that at the next meeting he would like to bring forward a motion that is going to direct staff to move forward and do the research on the cenotaph. So we would come back at the next meeting, council would have had time to think about that. Is that where you want to go with that? He would make that motion would pass, and then it would be so, and council would then go forward and do all the research. So that's how the notice of motion process would actually work.
Okay, I think we're all good with that. I see no lights on. No more comments, no more questions. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. So, with that, and I apologize to our cast presenters, but we are going to take a 5-minute recess, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. While Sharon brings up the presentation and the mouse over to our staff table here, I just want to take a moment to pause and acknowledge the contributions of our new senior planner, Gail Gibo, who's seated to my extreme left here. Gail is joining us from the Claresholm area. She has over 10 years of planning experience. She's a graduate at University of Waterloo, and she's a registered professional planner, member of the Canadian Institute of Planners, co-authored this report, and a big part of the reason why we're able to get it back in front of you so quickly after concluding the downtown visioning exercise. So my kudos to her. With that said, moving on in the report, let's begin by discussing what is a cast justification. And if I could have the lights, please. So a cast justification request is a proposal and a submission to give a landowner or landowners right to prepare a community area structure plan. The power rests exclusively with council as per section 2.9 of the Airdrie City Plan. Permission to do and apply for a community area structure plan does not confer approval of the plan itself. The submission would obviously have to continue to meet our community area structure plan guidelines that we have available online, public consultation and development of the plan, review by Planning Commission, and ultimately a public hearing and adoption by council are all required steps for any community area structure plan. In terms of the requirements for a community area structure plan, there are several. There's a list in section 2.14, and I won't read them all out this evening, but certainly there are a number of different things we look for in order to make sure that an area to be brought on for a community area structure plan makes sense. Ideally looking for some proportion of non-residential development, reducing fiscal implications and risks to the city, environmental constraints, feasibility of the land, ability of servicing, and alignment with Airdrie 1 are all key components of any request to have a community area structure plan proposal. A couple other points of policy from the Airdrie City Plan. Certainly the city is endeavoring to reduce sprawl wherever possible, so we're looking for contiguous and logical places to allow for the next area structure plan. We always want to ensure that their area structure plans are in places that will help us move forward our strategic priorities and are in line with growth analysis and land use projections. We also have a policy that we want to maintain between 10 and 20 years of planned land supply in all major land categories, that's residential, commercial, industrial, to accommodate medium-term growth. In that regard, when determining whether or not to accept community area structure plan request, we are looking at a number of different things, including population projections and growth trends, some of which Council saw last fall when we came forward with the growth strategy update, land availability, absorption rates, and the use of vacant land. So, as I mentioned a moment ago, Council received and adopted or accepted as information in November 2016 a growth strategy update prepared by Dillon Consulting. The more detailed breakdown, which I'm going to get to in a moment, indicates that we have approximately 8 to 10 years of available residential land supply. And what I'm put forward in front of you right now is the base assumptions, so the more conservative growth rate assumptions that Dillon made. You can see that under that scenario, the population growth and the cumulative growth and the amount of land it would take leaves us in a situation where we move from the current available supply of about 1,400 acres down to approximately zero by the year of 2027. And what the arrows indicate is the time period approximately when you would absolutely have to start planning for land in order to have shovels in the ground for about 2027. And under the alternate or more aggressive growth scenario, in which case our population was increasing slightly faster, in that scenario we would be out of available residential land supply by approximately the year 2025. And so, of course, in order to plan effectively at the very absolute latest date, you'd be looking to make sure that you were planning starting 2021, 2022 at the absolute latest. And of course, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's our established policy to be 10 to 20 years ahead of that. I'll just provide Council a bit of a timeline in terms of some of the steps and things that have come along the way. In September 2015, Hopewell had come forward with what is known as the Davy Creek land, and I'll describe those graphically in just a moment, for the ability to do a cash justification. And at that time, as mentioned in the report, administration recommended a refusal of that request, and Council ultimately agreed and defeated the motion 4-2. And that was because we wanted certain studies to be completed, in particular the utility master plan, which would help determine whether or not there was enough servicing capacity available for all the lands that were in the pre-annexation boundary for which already had plans adopted. And so that came forward in February 2016. It confirmed that yes, we do indeed have enough servicing capacity for all of the lands within the pre-annexation boundary, so all the lands we took before 2012, and that there's a little bit of excess capacity beyond that. In that regard, in July 2016, the correspondence was submitted to Council by the Westside Land Consortium, made up of Vesta, Genesis, and Westmark, asking for the ability to proceed with the cash justification. Council accepted that for information. In August 2016, administration came back to Council and indicated how we could look at the applications concurrently, the one from Hopewell for the Davy Creek lands and the one from the Westside Group. Council adopted that in August 2016. In September, by the end of September, we invited the applications to be made. They were made before the end of September 2016, and we were working on the applications since that time, a number of conversations which I'll describe in more detail until coming forward this evening. In terms of the geographic areas, for the benefit of everyone, the area that's here in light beige and surrounded by the black boundary, that is the City of Airdrie's boundary prior to the annexation in 2012. So when I refer to pre-annexation boundary, that is what I mean. I mean that black boundary with everything lightly beige inside. The areas beyond that, so this blue line with light or white around it, that is the new City of Airdrie boundary. That includes all the lands that were annexed in 2012. So if it is an area here that is white or colored outside of the black line, then that is part of the 12,640 acres that we annexed from Rocky County in 2012. This evening, the request in terms of the cash justifications are from the two sort of landowner groups. Hopewell with the Davy Creek lands here in the north, so it's these 3 quarter sections here, and the west side group made up of Vesta, Genesis, and Westmark on the west side here. What I've also highlighted for Council's information is we've indicated as staff previously that one of our key priorities in helping Council with well-managed and strategic growth this year is to do an area structure plan for an industrial area in the northeast, and so the 6 quarter sections have been outlined here. And I put that up for point of reference. I'm going to speak to that a little bit more going forward. In terms of the 2 applications, the first, the one on the north, the Davy Creek lands that is put forward by Hopewell, I'm taking this from their document. This is the generalized land use concept that they're preparing for which their area structure plan submission would likely be based on. This is certainly not set in stone. This would, if it was approved by Council to go forward, would obviously be massaged based on community needs, discussion with various stakeholders, discussion with staff, etc. But this is their preliminary concept. And you can see their general intent to protect the flood plain and the areas around Nose Creek, to integrate a series of wetlands and to provide some school sites. Here's a potential high school site here, an elementary school site on either location. You'll see that it's north of Reunion and Williamstown, bounded on the west by 24th Street, on the south by Veterans Boulevard, and by the communities of Reunion and Williamstown. There is a proposed mixed-use area that is east of the railway corridor and west of Main Street within their holdings here. It's this area that's in light pink here, and according to the plan itself, is intended to be approximately 1/4 commercial, about 3/4 residential, but obviously that's subject to demand analysis and some degree of change. Oh dear. Oh, huh. Okay, there you are. Whew. I was just going to get started. Opportunities and constraints. So for the Davy Creek lands, some of the key advantages, positive effect on non-residential tax ratio by virtue of the fact that it itself has some land that would be used for mixed use, so some commercial assessment that would be possible. It also facilitates bringing on more non-residential land. I'll get to that geographically in a moment, but there's a quarter section that is to the east of their holdings between it and Highway 2 that has been identified as part of the Airdrie City Plan for non-residential uses in the future, and so by bringing on these lands, it allows the pipes and the infrastructure to be put in place for that, but more on that to come. There's also a well site within the lands, and there's one within Reunion, and what the proponents have indicated is that if they were allowed to proceed forward with the area structure plan, then that would give them a certain economy of scale that would allow them to decommission both wells, so they wouldn't have it as a constraint likely for their future lands, and they'd be able to take the one out for Reunion as well and be able to implement the remainder of that Reunion neighborhood structure plan. It's contiguous with existing development, and there are fewer transportation constraints along Veterans Boulevard than there are along some other arterial roads, so the likelihood of additional capital projects would be somewhat reduced. In terms of constraints, there are some low-lying environmental lands there, which you've seen, and so obviously need to be planned around. It's not insurmountable, it's just something to be aware of. The site, as I mentioned a moment ago, it contains an existing well, but obviously there's a certain economy of scale that could be provided. The servicing does require connection through competing lands, and I can speak to that in a moment. But some of those competing lands are actually part of the other CAS justification requests coming forward this evening. So there's an further opportunity for collaboration and working together in that regard. In terms of conventional transit routes, which would typically rely on having a series of arterial roads that would loop and provide some looping opportunities, the physical location of this development wouldn't allow that. However, as I know you've heard from our transit coordinator, Chris McIsaac, all areas of Airdrie are intended to be serviced in the future through some degree of applications that would allow people to get to the nearest transit location, and so transit is still possible, just wouldn't be done in the conventional format. And what our school boards have indicated to us is that they have some degree of shortfall for schools within Airdrie in general, and especially in the west-northwest. They like the area to the west slightly more than the area to the north in terms of some of their catchment area, but they're obviously looking for opportunities regardless. So that's something that has been mentioned during the circulation. I bring it forward for Council's consideration. In terms of the West Airdrie lands, and so these are west of the communities of Sagewood and Bayview Bayside, and moving down to Yankee Valley Boulevard on the south end, and this is First Avenue connecting to the east on the north end, and this would be 24th Street, providing the eastern boundary of their lands here. This is the land use concept that they are providing to us, and you can see in the report, just for a point of clarification to make it easier, the blue areas are storm ponds. These pale green areas are potential school sites. The really pale areas are community parks. The sort of beigey orange areas are multifamily proposed multifamily. The light beige areas are low-density residential, and the light pink area is a proposed commercial node that would be along the Yankee Valley Boulevard west of 24th Street. This is also 3/4 sections of land, and it is traversed by high slopes, and that's one thing I didn't point out a moment ago, is that there's a ridge line running down the course of the development area, and they've already indicated as part of the preliminary land use concept that there definitely would be certain areas that they would be preserving from the slope point of view, and that allows for some unique development opportunities as well, potentially some walkout basements, things of that nature. And so we as staff would certainly have further conversations about how that would be handled all the way through. But it does mean, and I've noted here, that there would be 2 development pressure zones. So there's sort of a lower bench and a higher bench within these lands. And you can see that as you drive westward from town. You see the ridge as you go up out of town going to the west. Look, I did it to myself again. Opportunities and constraints for West Airdrie. It's contiguous with existing development. It is the preferred site for the school boards to have additional schools in order to help address their shortfall. And the location does make fixed transit routes possible, especially with potential future connections into Calgary by going down the 24th Street corridor. So it is quite sustainable from that perspective. Some constraints is that there is some topographical issues, and that's both, as I mentioned a moment ago, constraint and opportunity. There's some unique development opportunities that come from that, but obviously you may not be able to get all of the lands to be developed as a result, similar to the Hopewell lands, which also had sort of wetland and creek constraints. You would need some additional infrastructure for 2 pressure zones. It is possible that there would be need to advance some timelines for 24th Street and Yankee Valley Boulevard, because that would be the most logical route to get to Highway 2 from this development area. In and of itself, it doesn't have a lot of effect on the non-residential tax ratio, but as I will mention in a few moments' time, the whole really is the whole really is greater than the sum of the parts with respect to this by bringing both areas on. And by bringing both areas on, we're able to increase the non-residential tax ratio. There are a couple existing abandoned wells, and there are a couple drainage courses that would just need to be planned around, as you do for any land. You need to find the constraints, and you plan around them. So I mentioned a moment ago that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts on this one, and what I meant by that is that we have, in that time period between the submissions being made at the end of September and us now here being at the beginning of May, had a number of conversations with the developers that are in request to council here. And what we have indicated, or what they have indicated to us, is that they are willing to pay the upfront costs to go to the Phase 2 improvements of the Utility Master Plan. And so, to be clear, the Phase 1 of the Utility Master Plan indicates that it's possible to have about 1 to 2 quarter sections of residual capacity in the west-northwest, and that would likely be used up by residential exclusively. Going to Phase 2 means that you do have more upfront expense, but you're able to bring on considerably more land, and approximately in this case about 7 quarter sections of land. So that would allow all of the west side lands to be brought on, all the Davy Creek lands to be brought on, as well as this non-residential quarter section here. So not just capacity for it, not just the pipes that would make it available someday, but to be able to advance it by some degree as a result of making these infrastructure improvements, which include some improvements to lift stations, the twinning of pipes here, and having local reservoirs for each of these areas. We've also had ISL, our engineering, our consultants test out for us whether or not making any of these capacity improvements here would give any degree of constraint to other areas that we would want to bring on, in particular the Northeast Community Structure Plan, and it does not. So capacity that would otherwise be available right this moment for the Northeast CASP is not taken away by virtue of doing any of these changes on the west side, and I think that's very important for Council to know. The same capacity would be available regardless. One thing I would like to mention, and I mentioned a moment ago, is that this really truly is what we would consider as staff to be a win-win-win scenario. It's a win for the West Side group in that they're able to come online quicker. They're able to balance housing mix and provide a series of options, especially by having 3 different developers at the table, provide a series of different builders and contractors, etc. In terms of the Davy Creek and Hopewell, also the ability to bring on a chance to address the noted constraints by administration, an opportunity to provide some mixed use for themselves, and they have a development wing that does that, opens up land for developers and suppliers. But I really do believe that the City of Airdrie is the biggest winner in this, because by virtue of having this collaborative discussion, and it was good that we had that with all the development community and that they were willing to come up to the table here, by virtue of the upfront expenditures, It will allow us to accelerate the servicing of the mixed-use area, both within Hopewell, because if we only had 1 or 2 quarter sections of capacity, and if council were just to give it to them, it would be very unlikely we'd be able to bring on any of the non-residential. They would start on the west end of their holdings and just likely do the residential first. So by virtue of working together, this brings on all the area and allows them to bring on their mixed use a little bit sooner than might otherwise be possible. The financial backing allows us to do the Phase 2 infrastructure improvements that allows us to potentially open up even more lands in the future, especially that quarter section between the Davy Creek lands and Highway 2 for non-residential uses. It allows us to address some of the school shortage opportunities by having more quarter sections to work with. So by virtue of having, say, up to 7 quarter sections to work with, although some of them are non-residential, it gives us more flexibility in terms of where those would go than just using the Phase 1 improvements, which would only bring on 1 to 2 quarter sections. And it allows us to meet our statutory policy of having 10 or more years of planned land supply, and gives us the time to create an offsite levy bylaw for the annexation lands, so we would know how much to charge the developer, so we'd be able to pay back these upfront expenditures that are being done by the development group. In that regard, Council has 4 options that administration has presented. The first is to approve both cast justification areas. The second is only to approve the west side cast justification area. The third would be to approve only the Davy Creek land, so the ones to the north. And the fourth would be to approve none of them, to refuse the cast justification requests, and to await the 12,000 acres plan. And I do actually want to go back just for a moment here and talk about that. When I talk about 12,000 acres, what I mean is that we as administration have also indicated to council that we would, as part of meeting your strategic priorities for well-managed growth, undertake what we're calling the 12,000 acres plan. So that is to do a high-level land use and development sequencing land study plan for all those areas that are not otherwise taken up within a CASP or within the pre-annexation area. And so everything that would be on that would be part of the 12,000 acres plan. If council were to approve neither of these applications, then all of the lands that are outside the pre-annexation boundary, all 12,640, would be awaiting the 12,000 acres plan, except the northeast CASP, because that was identified by council as a key strategic priority to bring on those non-residential uses. With all that said, recommendation of administration is to proceed with both CASP. As I mentioned a moment ago, the commitment that we have received, and there's an attachment to your report about this, signed by all 4 developing groups, allows us the confidence to know that the front-end costs will be carried by them and that we can pay back that later through the offset levy bylaw collection. It means that we will be able to bring on mixed-use lands within Hopewell more quickly, as well as the non-residential between Hopewell and Highway 2 much more quickly than we would otherwise be able to do. And it allows us to maintain 10+ years of planned growth without undermining the 12,000 acres plan, because the remainder of those areas would still go through that planning process, and we would still endeavor to do that for those remaining lands. So we would understand after this next wave of growth, after this next 10+ years of growth supply, what comes on after that. So we would still be able to do that. And with that, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm going to conclude my presentation and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Gail, welcome. You didn't do a great job presenting tonight because it wasn't you. I was hoping we're getting you. We know Stephen very well. But welcome. We're thrilled you're here. I've heard a lot of great things about you. Councillor Coulson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, out of curiosity, where are we at with that second water pipeline that we know is going to need to come? At what point does planning start with that?
Through the chair, we recently installed that new 600 millimeter pipeline from Calgary to Airdrie, and it terminated around the South Windsong Reservoir. So that provides a sufficient capacity for the full build out of the city. So that's we're looking at about 2025. So we have conversations that we need to have with Calgary when we need it, alignments and whatnot, but we haven't determined an exact time when it's going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor.
So through the chair, first, Stephen, good recovery. I never often see things disappear on you. You're usually, that was very nice you picked that up and got it back on stream. So couple of questions. So you had alluded to a 20 to 25 year supply, land supply earlier. Is that still relevant and appropriate strategy given our movement to so much multifamily? Is that, does planning feel that that's still relevant today?
Through the mayor, to address the question of Councillor Hunter, What I quoted was the policy section 2.10 of the Airdrie City Plan, which said 10 to 20 years of planned supply. Yes, we still believe that's relevant. That's typical for most municipalities in Alberta to have that degree of land supply so we can understand what our capacity needs are and be able to do effective planning going forward.
And so through the chair, that would be a combination of single family, multifamily, non-res, all those pieces, correct?
Through the chair, to address the question, Councillor Hunter, that's completely correct, sir. As we indicated in the policy, it's the intent to be 10 to 20 years in all categories, residential, commercial, industrial. I didn't specifically mention in my presentation, but when Dylan did their growth strategy update, they also indicated that it's approximately the same time frame for non-residential, about the year 2025 to the year 2028, in which the capacity would be close. So.
Okay. So when the original proposal came forward with Davy Lands, we had a bit of an issue with restricted sewage capacity. Has that been corrected, or is that part of what this next piece will do?
Through the mayor, to address the question, Councillor Hunter, I'll start, and if Lauren Stevens needs to add in, I'll certainly welcome that. But by virtue of these Phase 2 improvements that are specified in the Utility Master Plan, that addresses the water and sanitary needs to be able to bring on these lands. But I welcome Lauren.
Through your worship and to members of council, if I summarize the Utility Master Plan, there were 3 distinct phases within that. Phase 1, as Stephen has alluded to, confirmed that there was existing capacity within our pre-annexation boundaries, and it also confirmed that there was approximately 1 to 2 quarter sections of residual capacity in our system in the northeast, 1 to 2 quarter sections in the southeast, and 1 to 2 quarter sections on the west. And so originally when the Davies lands came forward, certainly the concept was, or the impression that administration was receiving is there was a request in play to utilize that 1 to 2 quarter sections under that Phase 1 scenario. What has happened now is that with the collaboration of administration and the 2 development consortiums, the proposal on the table is to advance the Phase 2 component of the ultimate infrastructure capacity, and then, as Stevens alluded to, that allows for reaching over towards the non-residential lands closer to Highway 2 at a much earlier date than otherwise would have been contemplated. Ultimately, and I'll be very clear with Council on this, the Phase 3 component of the Utility Master Plan is going to contemplate very significant investment, as we've previously advised Council. That will require many minds and many wallets to overcome some very surmountable but challenging cost implications and so forth. But what you see before you here is moving the needle from simply looking at what exists in that Phase 1 Utility Master Plan to advancing us to Phase 2 of the Utility Master Plan.
Perfect. So you know, I like the concept, the fact that we're being able to move forward, growing our community, keeping jobs in our community, all kinds of commercial activity to me is absolutely critical in this time in our province and maybe in this country. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to see that the consortiums got together and staff have been working diligently to, you know, it's not, all along the way there'll be amendments and little bits and pieces that have to change as we find new information as we move forward. I understand that. I would like to speak to, there's some concern in the community with some of the abandoned wells. I have a bit of experience in the oil patch back around the turn of the century. Maybe technology's changed a little bit, but I would like to know, first and foremost, do we have a robust emergency management plan in place to deal with the unlikely chance that one of these wells leaked, exploded, et cetera?
I'm going to ask our Chief Weinberger to come forward, please, sir. I don't see Lori LaFace here, so you are our second best choice, Chief, tonight. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Through the chair, to answer the question of Councillor Hunter, yes, we have a very robust emergency management plan, as well as whenever there's affected well sites that affect residents within our boundaries, they also have to provide an emergency response plan.
And so, through the chair, is that emergency preparedness or response plan available for the public on, if they so choose?
Through the chair, I'm not 100% positive on if it's available to the public. It's available and supplied to every member affected in the public realm. There may be pieces of that are available to the whole public, but a lot of it's confidential information.
Right. So one of the challenges I have is some people in the annexed residential acreage areas having some concerns with, what if and those types of things. And I know when we did some of the stuff in Bayside, there was an abandoned well there. I think they were just finishing off with that reservoir at the time that we were debating it. And so I guess, Alberta's oil and gas country, and they're everywhere, and so I just need to understand, and citizens need to understand that we do have, if need arises, we do have the ability to have access to the information that would allay some of the fears and maybe misconceptions that are out there. Do we have, and I certainly, through the chair, I don't expect the chief to have an answer to this, but do we have the ability as a municipality to ramp up the abandonment standards of wells, whether it be cementing in the boreholes, any of those types of things, or is that something that we need to give all of the or take all of the guidance from the provincial government? Again, part of that is alluding to there's been conversation across this province about abandoned wells and the ability to go and get the people that abandon those wells to do the proper job. And again, those are huge, huge concerns across the province, but even more so if we're in so ownership of the well and getting passed on to companies that have no assets and different things like that. So I guess the question would be perhaps through city manager or Lauren, somebody could speak to, do we have the ability to ramp up the standards of abandonment of these wells, given that we're going to be putting them in residential areas?
Your Worship and members of council, my understanding is that is the Energy and Utilities Board that has a jurisdiction on that particular element. I will say, though, that through the planning process and the forthcoming CASP work, we will work with the development consortiums to identify and propose mitigative measures. Those would come before council in a CASP document. If those were satisfactory to council, they could certainly indicate that. If they felt there were still unanswered questions or members of the public at a public open hearing felt that there was insufficient information, council could certainly request additional information in that regard. But we have talked to, I know I participated in one of the discussions with one of the developer groups on this particular topic of well abandonment, and essentially they've advised the only way that they could change the sequencing of the well decommissioning was more or less to purchase the assets associated with that particular facility installation. And at the time and in that particular instance, they indicated that was uneconomic to do so because there was still a viable well life in that particular case.
So that would, through the chair, that would be for producing wells, not abandoned wells, correct?
Sorry, through the chair, that particular comment I just cited was based on a producing well. Yes.
Right. So I guess through the chair, my caution would be, so not so much to developers, but again, as these wells are abandoned and downloaded on to companies that have no assets, that's going to be a huge problem across this province, and that would be my caution, that we as a municipality engage in making sure that we have that conversation before we ever get to that point. Because if, the old adage that in Alberta, the polluter pays, well, if the polluter's gone and doesn't have any money and sold it to, a word was shell company, that would be a huge concern, not just from an abandonment standpoint, but potential. If they're not abandoned properly, it's going to make the chief's job and his resources that much more difficult. So I really caution that. Alberta's covered with it. But now, it's been said, and I keep hearing in the community that there's a concern out there with some people in the community about destruction of wetlands. And I can say in my time on council, and maybe staff can speak to this, that no longer do we destroy wetlands. It seems to me that that's not an MO for our jurisdiction and others that I've seen, typically they're re-engineered, and that is a commonplace practice, whether it be, I remember the Windsong one where they actually were planting some swamp grass and things like that in the day that we used to think was not good stuff is now being, I would have to say, re-engineered, and I guess I would like it confirmed that, in fact, that we do work very closely with all of the development community and the experts to re-engineer the wetlands, and we don't typically destroy the wetlands. Is that accurate to say?
Through the mayor, to address the question of Councillor Hunter, I would endeavor to say that the best practices in the planning profession would be employed for these cast areas going forward. Certainly wetlands are a key part of that. I have an image that is in the temporary folder, but I don't think it's necessary to provide, but back in 2011, the City of Airdrie had worked with O2 Planning to do the ecological and best practices report and identified certain key wetland areas. So it would be false to say that the City of Airdrie doesn't value and keep its wetlands. There are quite a few, and as Council may recall, when I brought forward in August 2015 amendments to the Hillcrest Neighbourhood Structure Plan, there was a very tiny part in the southwest corner that hadn't previously been thought of as important, and when we did the biophysical impact assessment, it was, even though it was fairly ephemeral, and even though it represented a very small portion of that land base, the developer at that point in time saved that. And so we're consistently doing that in all the various areas, and that's a big part of our planning process. So my succinct answer to that would be yes, Councillor Hunter, that would be incorporated in the planning process going forward.
Perfect. So through the chair, can you just, what did you call that, bio what?
Through the mayor, to address the question of Councillor Hunter, that's biophysical impact assessment, or BIA for short.
Glad there's an acronym. That's a mouthful. Much appreciated. And so I guess in this process, and I'll ask the chair where it would be appropriate to do that. I do have a resident that has sent an email that has been provided to all of council. I'm assuming staff have it as well. This individual would like that read into the record. And I can say that I've read it. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the contents, or there's a lot of information in there I think that might be available to this individual should she so choose, but I'll leave it to the chair as to when we want to read that into the record.
So if it's all right with you, hear from other of our colleagues, and then we'll, if you feel, so the letter was read by everyone. I believe all of us had a copy of the letter, so I've read it. Has anybody not read the letter? I know administration. Chief, did you see the letter? You've seen and read the letter as well? Are you confident that the message has been sent, or do you still, knowing that everyone has seen and read the letter? And
So again, once again, this is, so everybody on this side of the bench and staff understand those things. To me, the important piece here is a resident has asked us to read it into the record for whatever,
okay.
And I haven't had a chance to have good discussion as to why she felt that way, but I said that I would ask.
All I was trying to do is indicate that your line of questioning was aligned with that letter. So rather than repeat it, your line around the abandoned well site and the concerns, those were echoed in that.
I know those were actually go back to Davy Lands and Bayside.
Yeah,
and
I know, but that's, anyway, I'll allow it, but we'll hear from others first. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Stephen, you referenced the 12,000 acre plan. With whatever stage you're at now, where do these parcels fit in with what you've done so far?
Through the mayor, to address the question of Deputy Mayor Bellick, just before I do, Sharon, would it be possible to have my presentation put back up so I can refer to a map? Perfect. So, Deputy Mayor Burley, the 12,000 acres would be taking in all of those areas that are outside of the pre-annexation boundary. Mm-hmm. And we are at the stage right now where we have now selected a consultant and are just finalizing the negotiations of the term of the contract with them, and should be able to start essentially any day now and data transfer with them. That process is expected to take approximately 9 to 12 months, be back in about a year's time. It is likely that elements that would be known about these properties by that time could fold in as chapters to the report, but it would take in all of those areas. So that's where we're at in terms of status, and that's what it means geographically.
Oh, okay. And when you refer to the sites being less desirable by the school boards, school sites are school sites and they need them, and if the population is there, why would they be less desirable?
Through the mayor, to address the question of the deputy mayor, essentially what's happening there is that they're indicating that some of the shortfall of schools that they perceive to be the greatest, given the catchment areas and the number of student population coming out of it, is generally in about this area here. And so in that regard, school sites that would be more closely aligned with it, more geographically aligned, more contiguous, would be preferable, as opposed to, say, perhaps having one up here. But in the line of preparing school sites, there's obviously a high degree of collaboration and discussion still to be had. So that was a preference, a statement only, and certainly not an absolute requirement. The fact that we have multiple landowners at the table here provides even more opportunity for collaboration and for discussing best opportunities. And I think that's one of the key messages of this, is that the fact that we had the discussions with each of these land consortiums allowed us to reach a solution that when we were looking at in July and August, we weren't absolutely certain was possible. We thought we would be definitely in a competition point with multiple groups for 1 to 2 quarter sections of capacity. And here today we find ourselves in a collaborative opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And with the Davies land, it looks like the MR is going to be a lot higher than 10% with all the wetlands and where the creek is. Am I correct in that assumption?
Through the mayor, to address the question of the deputy mayor, a lot of that green space, I'm just going to go back to the land use concept. While certainly it bears to be completely determined, a fair amount of this area, for example, here, like floodway, is definitely ER, certain degrees of floodplain. So that comes out of the developable area, and it's only the net developable that has to provide MR. So you provide MR out of that net developable area. The others is environmental reserve, and so that's a separate category. So it's very likely that in the case of these 3 quarter sections here, you would get a situation where you have a high degree of ER, environmental reserve, and then the municipal reserve coming out of that remaining portion. Very often you do not have a high degree of municipal reserve out of the non-residential areas, and so that can be taken and put into some of the other residential areas, or taken as cash in lieu to provide other options for the municipality going forward. So there's a lot of flexibility.
Okay. And with regards to the development, do we have any idea on the build-out? What I don't know if I missed it in the report, what the population addition will be there?
Through the mayor, to address the question of the deputy mayor, well, we didn't do an analysis of that per se. It's typical for us to have a quarter section to have approximately 1,200 units per, and that when you multiply that by the average population per household of about 2.66, typically comes in the range of about 3,000 to 3,200 residents. So you're talking approximately 9 to 10,000 out of 3 quarter sections of land. So that's what each of these areas would mean. Now, obviously, there's a lot of environmental reserve taken out. There's some mixed use, etc. So that's subject to change. I neglected to mention at the end of my report, but I know it was mentioned during public questioning period, that the developers are here this evening if there's a specific question to them in that regard. But I would be giving you the high-level assumptions. And at this point in time, considering we're just voting on the right to do an area structure plan and not actually the area structure plan itself, there's no definitive answer.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And my last one is just to comment, Your Worship, it's having the city and the development community work together to come up with a solution that jump starts us ahead and helps everybody. Thank you.
So, yeah, echoing your remarks, Deputy Mayor, the being involved in a lot of those meetings at the outset, going back, well, probably several years now, seeing the northeast CASP and not being impacted, and that we're moving forward on that non-res assessment, and seeing that start to come into play. Having the non-res component in the Davie piece as well is very exciting. There's not a lot of commercial up in that end of town. I like the fact that we're allowing 3 very good, excellent, I won't say, I shouldn't say it like that, because they're all 3. They're really good developers. And having them all collaborate, I honestly wasn't sure either. When you said that, it reminded me of our conversations going back. How is this going to work? And the fact that all of you collaborated, and I see everybody in the room tonight, kudos to you guys, and kudos to you and your staff, Stephen, because I believe, and I'm fully supportive of what you're proposing tonight. I think it's great on so many fronts. It's exciting. It incorporates a lot of our priorities as a council, and looking forward to supporting the motion. But again, just congratulations, and just thank the development community for recognizing the need to get together to solve some of the issues that were put in front of you, because I know they were challenging, and to hear the results is pretty awesome, and to see it on paper is even better. So thank you for all your work to everybody. Again, just reiterating your comments, Deputy Mayor. Is there any other comments for Stephen before I move on the motion? I don't see any light on, so I'll ask Deputy Mayor Burley, please. Oh, I apologize. I did. Yes. Yes, please, if you would like to read that letter into the record, please.
So, through the chair, I received an email. All of council has it. Staff's alluded to that they have it. And I did just get some information from the resident that said explanation information was not available prior to the meeting as of late. Posting, and that Stephen was away. So some of these questions may well have been answered, some may not. My expectation is I'll read this, and then I'm absolutely sure that staff will get the answers out there as they see fit and in a proper form. Councillor Hunter, please accept this email as a letter of concern. I would appreciate if you would please read this letter in the minutes of May 1st, 2017. Council meeting pertaining to agenda 12.1 CASP justification request. Urban Systems has been given a free pass, so to speak, as all they did was write a letter in July 2016, whereas Hopewell has had to do a lot more work to get to this point. They presented to Council in October 2015 and were deferred until utility assessments could be completed. Staff's presentation is not correct. Council did not assent to the request by Urban Systems on behalf of their clients as the July 4, 2016 Council meeting. Council voted to file a correspondence. Please see the official minutes of that meeting and note that these minutes were accepted as presented at the August 2016 Council meeting. Council also did not give any instructions to Urban Systems whatsoever as stated by the planning presentation to Council. Council moved and voted to file the correspondence only. Administration overstepped their bounds and took it upon themselves to proceed, giving Urban Systems permission to move ahead, and that Council acknowledged the request. Urban Systems July 26 correspondence was filed only. Administration did not trust the UMP report and assertions that the utility systems in place would be sufficient and commissioned an independent engineering evaluation. This step would not have been taken without Council permission. Should not have been taken without Council's permission. Administration should not have spent that money without Council approval. The UMP stated that there was capacity and the independent evaluation suggests similar results, but included upgrades that would be beneficial for future development of civic land. Why do taxpayers have to pay for a report? This cost was not approved by Council. This additional cost should be incurred by the developers, not taxpayers. All landowners that will be affected by the development and planning recommended utility upgrades have not been consulted. The engineering reports and administration reports indicate that upgrades and line extensions will be taken up to the civic lands off Range Road 13. The annexation agreement in sections 7.4 and 7.5 clearly states the developers and landowners will be responsible for any and all costs associated with construction, extension, and or upgrading of municipal infrastructure to lands within the annexation territory, and that they will be evaluated and prioritized by Airdrie within the context of the Airdrie Municipal Development Plan and or area structure plan in place at the time. The current plan is from 2014. Staff has clearly stated that extension of the infrastructure is provided in the documents would be advantageous to the city. Using offset rural residential property owners in this manner is not acceptable. According to the annexation agreement, rural landowners would be forced to pay for these upgrades via offsite levies. Staff has stated that the lands in question to the west were not required for development according to the City Plan 2014. Quoting the City Plan, rural residential. The rural residential designation reflects the existing rural estate lot residential communities that were annexed 2012. No changes to the existing land use mix or intensity are contemplated for these areas at the time. Section 2.13 of the City Plan states that there is more than enough pre-annexation land undeveloped to allow the city to grow to the projected growth rates. The rates included in this report have been updated. However, it does not state anywhere how much pre-annexation land is available that is undeveloped. There is insufficient information for Council to proceed with approval of the lands that are within the annexation areas according to the City Plan. The CASP does not include non-res land developments to be brought online, and as such does not meet the requirements of Council to be able to increase tax generation from non-res land use as defined by the City Plan 2014. If Council proceeds with the west land developments and the utility infrastructure upgrades, rural residential taxpayers may have to pay the cost via off-site levies. I do not wish to pay for upgrades so a developer or the city can develop lands when I have not been consulted.
Attachments 10 and 11 were not included in the agenda at the time of this review, April 27, 2017. As a resident of Airdrie and one who may be affected by this decision, I wish to state that I am not against development. However, I request that Council approve only the Hopewell-Davie development as they have prepared their report and presented to Council previously and have returned as instructed by Council with the proviso that an emergency response plan be documented within the context of the development in conjunction with the City Development Corporation and oil and gas companies owning the facilities on site. Currently, there is not a plan publicly available on the city website specific to oil and gas facilities within the boundaries of the city limits. I request this letter be written into the minutes and not filed for information. Of course, if City Council files this letter for information, I will assume, as the Planning Department has assumed, that Council has assented to my concerns within this letter. CM, Geologist.
Okay, thank you. Was there anything in there, because I heard a number of things that I didn't necessarily align with my thinking. I wondered if Paul or Lauren could comment certainly around capacity and some of the other statements around council, no council approval, because that's not what I recall. So Paul or Lauren, if you want to comment. Or I'm sorry, Stephen, go ahead, please.
Sorry, Paul, go ahead if you want.
Yeah, through the chair, and I expect I'll be rescued very shortly. Just a couple comments. In review of this, the letter writer is correct. On July 4th, correspondence was filed. What's not in here is there was a council meeting in August in which council was presented with the justification process, and that process was accepted formally for information. So that was direction and advice that we were going ahead with this. In terms of levies, just a general principle, land is not levied until development is occurring. Urban development is occurring on those lands. So I just want to make that clear. And I believe Stephen made the point that I think it refers to the need for more lands being brought into the city, and that's addressed under your city plan policies of 10 to 20 years of growth being demonstrated, and I think that was brought up tonight. But with that, open to the rest making some comment.
Okay, Stephen, go, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I could just add, at the July 4th meeting when it was filed for correspondence, there was a 6-minute time period between 3 hours and 1 minute and 3 hours and 7 in which there was discussion about the fact that this could mean an additional application coming forward. So that was discussed, and Council was aware of that as they filed the correspondence. In terms of administration not trusting the utility master plan, the study that was done to determine whether or not it was possible to bring on both of these areas was supplementary to the utility master plan and paid out of funding dollars for that. It does not mean that we couldn't charge that back. It's certainly an option, but something that could be determined at another date. But what it did do is it allowed us to investigate an option that we hadn't previously considered, especially in July and August. So I think that's important. And then about Section 2.13 of the city plan, yes, as Paul mentioned, it means that we are intending to have 10 plus years of supply, and that's part of what this does.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. Deputy Mayor, you want to make your motion?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Hunter.
Yeah, so through the chair, again, the resident had sent me a late text saying explanation information was not available prior to the meeting, his latest posting, and that you were away. And so, again, this is one of those things where public input, public question period, this is how it works, and this is good. And so we've been able to talk about this, put some stuff out there, got some good solid answers. I'm assuming that some of these maybe that need to be tweaked, you guys can get back to this resident at will. But again, that to me is the piece that really works. And so we always hear about, this didn't work and that didn't work. This is one of those situations where a resident was allowed to have their say. We've got some good quality answers. We've got some information being able to be sent back to this individual. And so again, thank you to staff, everybody that allowed this. Thanks to the chair. This came in to me about 6 o'clock this morning before I got up. So it was one of the first things I got. So I sent it out very quickly and asked for everybody's indulgence. And again, I just want to say that thanks to everybody, because this is really does have an impact on these people in those areas, and it's important that they have their say, and I think they've had their say, and I look forward to more questions from this individual and more answers from staff. So thank you very much.
Excellent. was just thinking on our earlier discussion, we should time council. Councillor Deputy Mayor Burley, I apologize.
Now, Your Worship?
Yes,
okay,
please.
I make a motion that council approves the community area structure plan justification requests of both the West Lands Consortium, the west side of the annex area, and Hopewell, the Davy Creek lands.
Excellent. No questions or comments? All those in favor? Supported unanimously. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. We're moving on to item 13, which is correspondence. There are no items. Board member reports are going to start to my far left tonight. To Councillor Chapman, please.
Thank you, Worship. If I could make a motion to excuse Councillor Haig, please.
Absolutely. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
And nothing further for me.
Thank you. Councillor Bellick, please.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter, please.
So, through the chair, I have a couple of things. Number one, so we had our annual Home and Garden Show, and I need to put a huge shout out to Airdrie 4-H Club and Airdrie Alarms, who allowed them to sell raffle tickets. They're having a lamb raffle, and so you could win a lamb cut, quartered, and ready to go, or $2,000 cash. They made a phenomenal amount of money, and that money will be donated to the Airdrie Health Foundation, which is near and dear to my heart. The mayor got a ticket, but I can tell you it's not the winning ticket. I have those two. So big a shout out to them. I would like Sharon, through the permission of the chair, to post the picture that I had sent earlier. Are we able to do that? This is something that really, so today, Deputy Mayor Burley, myself, Citizens on Patrol, and our municipal enforcement people were out talking about rail safety. And so we were handing out pamphlets. Roxanne West, who lost her son 16 years ago at that location, was there. Become really a big thing. As I finished...
Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Hunter. Could somebody please go out and ask those people in the lobby to carry their conversations? It's quite echoey up here, please. Thank you very much. Continue, please. Sorry, sir.
So, what this picture shows, so as I finished and was heading into Calgary for an appointment, I noticed a young man walking down the tracks with a headphone on, grooving to the music, absolutely oblivious to everything going on. I think I scared my wife because, boy, I pulled over so fast. I managed to be able to flag him down and waved at him and said, you need not to be there. Like, this is, I told him another young lad had lost his life in exactly the same fashion. He said, it's all good, man. It's all good. I'm late for work. I got to get going. And I said, you know what? I don't care if you're late for work. Get off of the tracks. He did step down into the lower area and kept going. But I wanted to bring this forward and I've sent it to all the media outlets. I sent them pretty much the same thing, to say that we absolutely, in this community, absolutely have to talk to these young people. And I don't know what the process would be, RCMP, municipal enforcement, to start giving these kids tickets, because I would rather have them mad at me because of a ticket than explaining to their parents why we're having another funeral in this community. And it was just, I mean, one of those things that, I was absolutely astounded and flabbergasted when I saw this after we had just finished. And that's always an emotional event when we go with Roxanne and talk about her losing her son. But heavens, this situation is just absolutely critical that we get that message out, that it's not safe, and that we really need to ramp it up. And I don't know, I'll leave it to our new commanding officer and ME to decide whether going and giving out a whole bunch of tickets, this seems to be the path of travel for a lot of the people working in the south end of town. And for whatever reason, it's level, it's got, you know, the ties and all those things. But we need to really stop this before something tragic happens. And that really, it scared me. It really shook me up today. So apologize for a little bit of emotion, but again, won't apologize for trying to stop this kind of stuff, because it's dangerous and we don't want to lose another kid. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
And you're going to FCM. You need to be get on the list for the CP's update on all of their rail safety. They're hosting a lunch, and make sure that I'll connect with Barbara so that you're in attendance at that meeting. Deputy Mayor Burley, please.
Thank you, Worship. A couple things. Again, as Councillor Hunter said, that the home and lifestyle show on this weekend, I really want to commend the Chamber. They did an amazing job again, organized well, attended well, and the vendors that were there, the ones I talked to anyway, did very well. It was a success as always. As Councillor Hunter said today, the reason I have a passion for it is Roxanne herself and her mother, and what they've done to make this aware is amazing, and I give them all the kudos in the world for it. It's a pleasure to be a part of it every year with her, just to be able to stand beside her and hand them out and then hug her every now and then when she starts to cry, but it's worth every second of it. And the last thing was I want to thank the mayor. I was able to do a lot of deputy mayor duties this last week or so, attend the mid-sized city mayors conference and a few other things, and it was definitely an experience, and I want to thank you for the opportunity.
Glad you're able to go. They appreciated your attendance. Councillor Coulson.
I think it's important that we point out that our new police chief has stayed for the entire meeting, and thank you for that.
And we'll see you
Yep. You'll get a free pass, I'm sure, after tonight. Kudos to the staff who manned the booths at the Home and Garden Show. They did an excellent job engaging with the public. I was only there to see our planning department on the downtown visioning, and of course our waste and recycling team, and everybody did a great job. Nothing but positive comments that I heard. There was some confusion and was easily explained by our city staff that know their stuff, so well done to them. And I'd like to make a motion. I'm just kidding.
I knew you were just kidding.
Point of clarification, I have motion sickness. I'd like to stand down, please.
That's probably correct. So a couple of things. We all received some correspondence from Matt Carr. I talked to Matt this afternoon, and he said he was fine bringing it up. So just want to give you an update. Paul is meeting with administration, with Kent and Stephen and Lauren in the coming days, and we're going to be responding. I also asked for some information from him as it related to some other individuals in his industry, if there's been any studies as it relates to too much multifamily and higher density products, stuff like that. So we're working on things going forward, so just want to let council know that. Received a letter from a gentleman. His mom's 88 years old and she's got nowhere to go. We have no level 4 care in Airdrie, which I was a little shocked at, but something that I told him I would bring up this evening, and I know Councillor Burley, we need to lobby the government, Deputy Mayor, as it relates to that type of care. I know Luckstone we approved. They did not get the funding, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. I believe there was also another opportunity at Cedarwood. They didn't get the funding for that as well. So, but it's something we really need to advocate for, because this person's going to get displaced, and she's going to get displaced somewhere in the province. Hopefully it's in a location that's good for her and her family, but that's really tough to hear, as I showed you the email. Sir, you want to comment, sir?
Yeah, just to let you know, Your Worship, that with the Rocky View Foundation, it's always on the radar, and we're always working toward it.
Yes, no, I know that for sure, and that's why I told him we'll definitely have some more conversation. Upcoming events, we've got some grand openings this weekend. We've got several, actually. My calendar's a little frozen at the moment, but we have the Boys and Girls Club event Saturday night, I believe, right? That's the Name That Tune. Name That Tune. Everybody will be heading over to check that out. There'll be there's a Perfect Home store opening. There's a number of exciting events all weekend long. And again, just echo your comments. I was only able to attend the show and the show for about 2 hours on Saturday. I had some other commitments, the Home and Lifestyle show. But again, just thank the Chamber. It's a huge, I forgot about this. It's a huge undertaking to host that event annually, and I know it's one of their biggest revenue sources, so it's great to see a good participation, and hopefully their numbers were there. We've got Volunteer of the Year Awards. They're happening this coming Thursday, and yours truly is the MC. We're going to have a great lineup of people. There's some awesome nominees, and we have volunteers out here in the audience still left over, some of them very highly touted. So looking forward to that. I want to thank Michelle and her team for pulling that together, because it's a big undertaking, and it's something that I'm really proud of, because I think, when you read this and you see this type of publication, it really showcases how much the community and the city of Airdrie appreciates the work that our volunteers do every day. And the vast majority of them you'll never meet, you'll never know, you'll never see. They just do it because they love to do it. And we get to showcase that in a nice evening. So I'm excited about that this coming Thursday. And with that, I'll turn it, oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
I forgot one thing, if I could add it, Your Worship.
Yes, go ahead.
I had the privilege of attending the United Church's 115th anniversary in Airdrie on Friday night, and they've been in their current location on that site for 95 years in that building. It opened in 1923, that building. So
that's
pretty
awesome.
Amazing.
Anyone there from the first service, or?
Dan McKinnon.
Oh, Dan McKinnon. He'll get that joke. But I would say it's too bad Dora didn't live here because she turned 100. She was born in 1917. So, board reports, Mr. Schultz, please.
Through your worship, just
updates. I
Clerk
apologize.
Pollock has something to say.
Clerk Pollock, go ahead, please.
If I may, Your Worship, I know I don't belong in board reports, but I have just a little bit of exciting news. You know, for us, we're always working and looking to increase our online participation on our census, and we surpassed last year today, and we still have almost 3 weeks to go. So we are pretty
excited. Can you give us a number?
We're sitting at about 62%
that's
response
huge.
online.
Wow.
So we're really excited.
Woohoo! Wow, that's awesome. And I will give you some, I got 5 messages on my Facebook from people saying, your assessor, your, oh my God, my brain's dead.
Enumerator?
Enumerators. Oh, sorry. They were great. They were polite and friendly and nice, and I just said, man, that's so nice to hear, but I'm not surprised. So I just wanted to give you that feedback. Mr. Schultz, please.
Your Worship, the list in front of you actually shows 6 reports, 2 coming next meeting, or 3 coming next meeting, and 3 in June. And then, so we're closing in.
Excellent, thank you. No other comments or concerns or questions. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I was going to get my motorcycle today. It was still.
Why?
It was closed.